Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for our November 27th, 2024 regular council meeting. I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we're gathered on is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. Earlier this week, a disturbing incident occurred where some members of our community woke up to their vehicles vandalized with racist hate speech. We must not minimize the impact of these racist attacks. These attacks of violence and intimidation cause deep pain and fear, and we condemn them unequivocally. I've been in touch with the Comox Valley RCMP to learn more about these incidents. While this is an active investigation, initial reports are that the victims whose vehicles and property were damaged were targets at random. Please contact the RCMP if you have any information or security video that may help them in their investigation. We're hopeful that those who committed this crime will be held responsible as soon as possible. These actions do not reflect our community we strive to be, and we stand in solidarity with the victims and those affected by this hate. We must challenge racism in all its forms and actively work to create a truly inclusive and equitable community where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected. This requires ongoing work, and we recommit ourselves to that work today. Thank you. All right, we've got a pretty busy agenda today. We'll try to keep it to an hour and a half to 2 hours, council, if we're able to do that. Give ourselves a goal. We'll start with our regular council meeting. Minutes, if somebody would like to move those. Excellent. Were there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll accept the minutes as presented unanimously. And wow, we're moving real quick now. Now we'll get into delegations. And just a reminder to our those that are giving delegations that our policy is not to make decisions on the day that a delegation is presented. And we'll start with the Morrison Creek Passage remediation. If you guys would like to approach the podium. And what happened to... There we go.
But there it is. Okay.
Yeah, the computer rebooted itself and it was like, just because I said we got to be on time today. It's technology.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Leon Fisher. I'm representing Morrison Creek Stream Keepers, and thank you for the opportunity to present an issue that I find very important. The Stream Keepers find it important too, and I think once people understand the situation, it'll become important as well. But more importantly, it's critical for the health and survival of the salmon and lamprey that call Morrison Creek home. So let me see this. So this picture here on the screen is the First Street culvert where Morrison Creek passes under First Street, just where it enters Puntledge Park. We're all probably aware of Morrison Creek and familiar with it. It's a beautiful creek that is in the middle of our city, and it provides opportunities for fish and lamprey and people to do things that no other community has. So I guess what I like to say is that I learned about Morrison Creek about 2 years ago when I first arrived in Courtenay, and I've spent a lot of time around streams in my past. Morrison Creek is unlike anything I've ever seen. So it's worth our interest and our protection. So Morrison Creek, a little bit about Morrison Creek. It's a unique spring-fed stream, flows through Courtenay to Puntledge River at Puntledge Park. It's home to 4 species of Pacific salmon. It's home to the endangered and protected Morrison Creek lamprey, which is found nowhere else on the planet. And it has 3 species of trout. It's a fairly healthy stream, but it suffers from habitat fragmentation. So what is habitat fragmentation? So habitat fragmentation is when different sections of the creek are isolated from each other. So in this case, fish cannot move through those different sections to access optimum spawning and rearing habitat. Presently, there's 2 culverts on Morrison Creek that present issues. Both of these we hope will be remediated this summer. This is one of them. So the challenge picture on the screen shows pink salmon in the in September of 2023, trying to get up this culvert. As you can see, there's a half a dozen in the picture there. None of those were successful in making into the culvert and above in their first attempt. What I've seen is you'll see a lot of salmon above this culvert, but that just means those are the ones you see that have made it through. There are many that don't make it. After several attempts, they'll tend to drop back down to the lower section of the creek and spawn there. It's very crowded. We've probably all been down to the arch bridge and below where we see fish spawning on top of fish. So again, that's one of the reasons that we need to look at this culvert and see what we can do about remediating it. So this is a video from September of 2023. This was a pink salmon run year. And again, until you get down there and see this culvert, you don't really know what's going on down there. So this was new to me. I'll play the video if I can. Any tips on how I can start this video here?
Should just have to click. If not, we can click it at this end.
Okay, I'll try the, let's go back.
There is a blank button, so it should just be the left and right buttons.
Yeah, there's a blank on
Oh.
top. There we go. So these are dozens of pink salmon. As you can see, the success rate is pretty well zero. This was the first time I've seen this happening, and really, until you get down there and see this, you don't understand how tough it is for fish to get up above this. So there were thousands of salmon trying and failing throughout September and October to move through this culvert and upstream. The large salmon, it's easy to see these fish having a problem. The ones that are tougher are the small juvenile salmon and the lamprey. So it's very difficult to see those, but again, there's hundreds, if not thousands, trying to get up to better habitat and not being able to do that. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so again, the big fish are easy to see. This slide shows a couple of the smaller fish. And again, unless you're down there and really observing, you don't see these. This was an eye opener to myself. The first picture here is coho salmon fry or par. This fish is probably 3-4 inches long. This is one of hundreds I observed on that day, trying and failing. Every one of them failed. They'll land in the fast water and immediately get flushed downstream. Second picture was taken May 2023. That's a Morrison Creek lamprey. Again, only found in Morrison Creek. They're very weak swimmers. They can't jump. They don't have a fast swim speed. And from what I've seen, 100% cannot make it through that culvert. So they are isolated to the section of the stream below the culvert. And again, they're unable to move into better areas to spawn and rear. And DFO has done some studies over the last 2-3 decades on the numbers of Morrison Creek lamprey, and the populations are dropping. In those documents, it was mentioned that habitat fragmentation was likely one of the main reasons. So what do we do to resolve this challenge? A couple solutions that we've looked at. First one I'm calling the Cadillac. So this is a bottomless steel arch culvert. So this would replace the existing culvert, which is about 3 to 4 meters diameter. The existing culvert would be replaced with a large bottomless steel arch culvert. This would accommodate 1 in 100 year rain events and provide fish passage. The schedule, I understand, is per the integrated rainwater management plan. It's several months of construction, and it needs to meet several regulatory compliance requirements. In brief discussions with the engineering department, with Janine and Chris, this was flagged as one of the priority culverts, I understand, for replacement, but again, I don't know the timeline. So in the meantime, in the short term, what can we do to help these fish out? So the next solution, and the one that we're pushing for the short term, is the Volkswagen solution. Sorry for my misspelling of Volkswagen. So this is to restore the existing riffle crest for tailwater control. And what is a riffle crest? So the riffle crest in this busy cross section is on the downstream side behind that happy fish. The Riffle Crest is showing as an elevated section there. That is a built up weir of rock and finer material that forms a resting pool below the culvert. The idea of the Riffle Crest is to backwater that culvert so there's a calm flow and the fish can swim in and access the upper sections of the creek. In our case, the Riffle Crest has been degraded over the years. I think it was built in 2000. So it's had 24 years of floods, and the Riffle Crest now is dropped by about 40 centimeters from its original design height, and it now doesn't provide a resting pool. It provides basically a fast current tearing through that culvert, and the fish have a hard time. So the fix is to restore that Riffle Crest to its existing elevation or its original design elevation. It's a short 2 to 3 day construction window. It's a fairly low cost. The $10,000 to $20,000 estimated cost is a real off the cuff cost. A hydrological assessment and permitting would be required because we need to confirm that there's no risk of flooding of the properties adjacent to or upstream of this culvert. So the drivers, why should we do this, or why do we want to do this? Obviously, it's to secure populations of the endangered Morrison Creek lamprey and of salmon, particularly coho salmon. So one of the prior slides, I had a picture of a small fish 3 or 4 inches long. That's a coho salmon that's trying to access the upper sections of Morrison Creek. We now have, due to the work of a lot of people, we have secured the upper watershed of Morrison Creek as a park or protected area. So these fish are trying to get up to those upper areas where they can access beaver ponds and marshes, where they can overwinter and survive for the next spring migration to the ocean. Compliance with the Provincial Water Act and the Federal Fisheries Act. There are laws around maintaining fish passage once that in-stream feature is in place. We also want to follow the lead of other jurisdictions in remediation of barriers to fish passage. So south of the border right now, Washington and Oregon are in the middle of multi-billion-dollar projects to restore hundreds, if not thousands, of fish passage issues, particularly at culverts. BC is catching up, but we have a bit of a challenge ahead of us. And to increase the overall health of this really amazing watershed for the benefits of the fish and of the people and of everything else that relies on this watershed for their good health. Morrison Creek is a rare and unique stream. It's a cool water refuge for wild fish, and it's really is a jewel in our community. I've kicked around streams and rivers for most of my life as an angler, a fisherman, and I have not seen a stream that has so many positive things going for it as Morrison Creek does. And within this community, everyone I've met is interested in salmon, and I think it's just a great opportunity for us at a low cost, big bang for the buck project to provide a solution for these fish coming up in summer of 2025.
Excellent. We're just over time, so maybe we'll transition to questions from council, if there's any questions. And we'll start with Councillor Hillier.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks very much for presenting. We're indeed fortunate to have Morrison Creek, and I think we're very fortunate to have the Morrison Creek stream keepers. The thing I'm curious about, there's been a lot of eyes on this stream and a lot of efforts around it, including the efforts to preserve the headwaters. I'm curious why we haven't heard about this challenge before, because I'm guessing that it's been an issue for some time.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I'm fairly new to the valley and the stream, but I do know I have looked at the original design documents, and the original design was to have that Riffle Crest 30 centimeters above the outlet of the culvert. So when it was constructed, the intent was to have that resting pool backwatered into the culvert. So when the reduction in height of the Riffle Crest happened, I do not know. but it's happened over time. So at now, when we look at it, there isn't a real issue there. It may have happened in the last few years. I don't know. So the original design was good. It was correct. It was to provide fish passage. So what we're asking is that the city work with Morrison Creek Stream Keepers, DFO and others to restore that to its original design height.
Hopefully we can come up with a resolution. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for bringing this to our attention today and giving us the background on the challenge. I live in the neighborhood. I wasn't aware of the challenge that this particular crossing creates, and I do spend a fair amount of time just, checking out what's happening in the stream as the year goes around. Two questions. One, we do have another culvert that's just a little bit upstream. Is this the only major challenge that's been identified, or is this the top of the
So,
list, but
yeah,
maybe not
there's-
the only one?
There's two culverts now that provide barriers to fish passage. I think the one you're referring to is a Miramar Road.
I was
which
thinking
is-
of the one on Willamar. Yeah.
Okay. So on Willamar, the two I'm aware of, are at Miramar, which is scheduled for replacement this summer 2025. And the other one is First Street. So Willamar, I know there's been work done in the past, to remediate some fish barriers there. But to the best of my knowledge, these are the last two barriers that present problems.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good to know. And then the other question I had was there was some really great restoration work that happened just upstream around Puntledge School Field. In fact, I saw Chinook in there this week for the first time that I've ever noticed. And I seem to recall that most of that work was funded by the Pacific Salmon Foundation. I'm wondering if you know whether or not this type of work, if it's done by a municipality, might qualify for that type of funding.
Sure, yeah. What I understand is that there is funding available either through PSF or DFO, other organizations within DFO. So yes, there is funding available. How much and that I'm not sure.
But probably worth us looking into if.
It is,
yeah.
yes. And I've talked to DFO, I've spoken with Comox First Nations. They're both very supportive of this project. And there is indication that there are funds available.
Great. Thanks so much for presenting today.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum, and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I'm also pretty familiar with this area, but not this culvert in particular. I know when I did one of the walking tours, there was a culvert identified, I think, off of 20th Street that was also, this was years ago now, but so I guess one of my questions was around, you mentioned there's obviously another culvert in the area, but I'm just wondering if yourselves or staff has kind of an inventory of numerous culverts that need attention, or are you in communication with
Sure.
staff around?
Yeah, on
Culvert.
Morrison Creek, I know of the two. I also know of one on Piercy Creek. That's a real problem. But being fairly new to the Streamkeeper organization, yeah, those are the three I know of. So
Right.
Morrison Creek, there's two, and if we can get those two down this summer, again, the Miramar Road culvert, we're pretty confident that's going to be remediated
Right.
this summer. But there are a lot of culverts within the creeks in this basin that
So
have the same problem.
Maybe I'll ask staff that question in a second. I have another question around, and again, this might be more of a staff question as well, but I'm talking about, changing the culvert, but is there more of a natural asset solution to this in terms of doing like a natural restoration? I don't know if that's more expensive but it's certainly, when we can get away from people-made infrastructure. And I have no idea. I don't know if that's a question that staff can answer.
Mr. Garbutt?
Thank you. Just mindful of the time with the delegation. But staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but the conversation about replacing that culvert, we are going to maintain in situ because of the astronomical cost. We're monitoring it, and decision by council was that we would subsequently close that road to traffic when it was not safely passable. And staff can,
Yeah, I think that's the
Hopefully
next
that's-
culvert just immediately upstream of this.
we are going to be replacing this culvert or not? Thank you. Sorry for the wrong answer.
And of course, after this, like, we won't make a decision at this meeting, but this will come back to council as well. And then staff will provide us with a, kind of an outline of stuff. So we're a little bit more informed, I guess, from the city staff perspective, but back to Council Moore.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, is staff able to answer that question around the sort of naturalizing these problematic people-made culverts?
Thanks, Counselor. We're in a position where we have some critical crossings. So if we were to daylight that stream across First Street, there would be a break in the road. And so then we would be compromising our connectivity with transportation. And so we do need a culvert in that location, but there is an opportunity for that culvert to mimic a natural stream with what the stream keepers have recommended, where we have a natural bottom that doesn't have an outlet that would create an eroded pool at the bottom. So
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and then I guess really if those works do go ahead as per your recommendation, then they would just be monitored, because that's kind of your what you guys do really well. And then
Right.
if we see this happening, kind of to Councillor Hillian's comment that, this is something that was done quite a while ago, but possibly unless it happened just in the last year or so, if that, monitoring to see if it's eroding at a constant level, or is it when we have these very extreme weather events that cause bigger issues? Yeah. But Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I probably don't need to say thanks another time, but I really appreciate it. And I'm sure if you're not hearing it, there's definitely support from me and probably others to get a report back and work forward on this. So thanks.
Great, thank you.
All right, yeah, so thanks so much for your presentation today, and not just for the presentation, but again, to your entire group for what they do for our community. It's very much appreciated.
Great, most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, and we will move on to our next delegation from You Are Not Alone, and we have Kelly Barney coming up to the podium.
Great. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Kelly Barney. I'm the executive director at YANA, which stands for You Are Not Alone. I'm here today. Thank you for having us and welcoming. And I say us because Sharmila Bakshi is also here. She's our event operations manager and actually has all the answers to all the things. So she's my road crew. We will be referencing today two documents that City of Courtenay documents that I'm sure you're familiar with. One is the City of Courtenay Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw 2988/2024. And then the other is the City of Courtenay Recreation Fees and Charges Framework that was prepared by RC Strategies. So per the new bylaw, the YANA Big Love benefit that's held annually at the Florence Filberg Center has been classified under the private event, fundraising, and NPO commercial use category, in the same category as things like weddings, reunions, lawn bowling tournaments, etc. For the Big Love event, this classification represents a 54% increase in fees this year. And with the continuing annual increases, it means 134% increase over the next 5 years. Our request today is an ongoing exception to that bylaw to classify the YANA Big Love benefit rental under the minor and senior NPO fee category. Our request is based on the fundamental distinction between nonprofit organizations and CRA registered charities, which may not have been fully considered when the classification process took place. Unlike NPOs, registered charities are legally required to focus exclusively on public benefit and direct community impact. So an NPO's operations and activities are very flexible, as long as they align with their stated operational purpose and they don't include profit generating activities as their primary focus, they can be an NPO. They're organized, they're operated for things like social welfare, civic improvement, pleasure, recreation, and by definition, any other purpose except profit. A charity, on the other hand, are required by law to spend a minimum amount each year on their charitable activities. A charity must be established and operate exclusively for one of 4 charitable purposes. So the first is the relief of poverty. That's the one that Yana's approved charitable purpose is. Advancement of education, advancement of religion, or, and again, this is the definition, other purposes beneficial to the community as a whole. It's part of the definition. The CRA requires charitable organizations must actually meet a public benefit test. So we have to show that our purposes and activities provide a tangible benefit to the public as a whole or a significant portion or section of it. 100% of Comox Valley families who have a verified need to travel out of the community to access medical care for a child under 19 or for a pregnant mother automatically qualify for support through Yana. 100% of local minors qualify for that support. The benefits continuum on the fees and charges framework has community-only benefits, so just the community benefits wholly from it on one side, so 100% tax support. And then it has user only, so the user group benefits wholly, 0% tax support on this side. Right now with the classification, Yana is sitting right here, one over from the right. And that's based on mostly the user benefits and the community only benefits partially. We believe that the community-wide benefit of the funds generated at said fundraising events should have the classification solidly over here. Yana has been helping Comox Valley families for 38 years. In the last 5 years alone, we've helped over 1,000 families with over 2,000 medical trips. And we've given 1.4 million in direct financial support to local families during that time. 96% of Yana's income on an annual basis is generated by the community for the community from local donations and fundraising events. The Big Love Benefit fundraising event brings in about 40% of all of our income every single year. So again, based on the high public benefit of the use of funds raised at the Yana fundraising events, we're requesting an exemption to the amendment bylaw 2988/2024 for our CRA registered charity to classify both operational rental fees and fundraising event rental fees under the minor and senior NPO category. Thank you very much again for having us. I'm happy to make sure I'll answer questions. Just kidding. I'll do my best.
All right. Thanks very much, Kelly, and obviously thanks for all what your organization does for our community. Not unlike the Stream Keepers. I mean, obviously it's something that has a deep and huge impact, and certainly something that I think our council is much in support of in general. Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. You make a great argument. And yeah, there's not too many people in the valley who haven't been helped or know someone who's been helped by your organization. So I look forward to seeing this come back to council and figure out what we can do. I think you're right. Your organization provides a huge benefit to the valley. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I don't see any further questions or comments at this point. So again, this will come back and we'll be in touch for sure.
Sounds
And
good.
we chat every now and again.
Okay.
So thanks so much, Kelly. Really
Okay.
appreciate your presentation today. So have a great night.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Okay, and we'll move on to the update on washrooms and storage facilities at Connect. And just gonna turn off the two microphones there. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, Ms. Wade will give an update on this and then just want to clarify, did we circulate documents? Okay, thank you. We had a little challenge with the agenda.
Ms. Wade.
Through the mayor to council. This is a report before you as a follow-up to the 6 resolutions that were passed at the July 31st, 2024 regular meeting of council. We are in a position to report back. One of the major requests of council was that in relation to the funding of 150,000, understanding if there was operational dollars available, and a request for us to discuss with our partners what operation funds would be available to support the CBTS to deliver expanded services to their clients. Island Health has provided 250,000 in grant funding to CBTS in order to operate their expanded services to their clients. Staff has now been working through the process in regards to implementation of constructing this area with the capital projects that we have discussed. And the Director of Recreation, Culture and Community Services has given notice in regards to the lease expansion that we are obligated to do under sections 24, 26, and 94 of the Community Charter. This notice has been given in 2 consecutive papers, and there's been no comments received. At this point, we are working together in a working group within the city and the operator in regards to finalizing the site plan. And we are working on the budget as we speak. And in the report, we've outlined the breakdown to date of the budget. And so far we are approximately 120,000. So we're still 30,000 under the budget, but we are refining the site plan. And we've also met with the neighboring properties and have considered their comments as well in the site plan design. And we will be finalizing the site plan, and we've got works organized and can start the implementation of this and hopefully be able to start the delivery of the capital projects in December. And I'm pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thanks so much, and really appreciate staff's efforts in getting this across the finish line and just again, dogged determination working with Island Health, and glad we got to where we are. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the staff report and all the work that's been done. I'm wondering if you can highlight some of the components in the staff report and maybe some further context around public engagement with the neighboring businesses and landowners, specifically around their feedback related to the design.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, yes. We met with him in September 12th, and we walked through the orientation of the site area, their concerns. So in regards to fencing, the fencing is 8 foot high. It is going to be cedar posts and black metal and then black chain fence around the lane and halfway down the parking lot. And it will also have privacy slats in it. So it'll look very similar the front to what's at the lodge. We've got that in dealing with sort of the aesthetics. We've been working with them as far as dealing with some of the issues around parking and signage, which we will implement moving forward. We will be circling back with the neighboring properties groups with the site plan and walking through and showing where we have made those changes and listening to what their concerns are, and where there might be some issues where we're going to have to, deal with, and in particular around the land that is associated with its city-owned land going up to the library. That's one area of concern that we will have to work through some issues around that. I think that those are basically all those comments that the property owners have shared with us. So we've been working with the operator in the design.
Excellent. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Speaking of, thank you for explaining the lay of the land of how that will be designed. I guess just in recognition that winter is coming and I'm wondering how we've considered the impact of snow removal on the design and ensuring that the flow of traffic and that those neighboring businesses are still able to access their businesses for their business purposes with the impending snow that we'll be likely getting.
Through the mayor to Councillor Joker, yes, there's a flow through with the parking lot and it has a one-way going around. And that will be maintained in our usual snow management process in that area, because that's city-owned land and the lane. And then in regards to snow removal within the fenced area, that would be part of the operations that CBTS would be dealing with.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Two questions that come from a city resident. One is there is reference in the report to staff seeking a funding contribution from other regional governments and BC Housing. And I'm just wondering if anything has come through in that regard or if those requests have been made.
Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian, I think I might need a little clarification on that. So as far as funding for operating, BC Housing is involved with CBTS with their funding operations and has worked with CBTS on their operating budgets needing to operate the space that they currently have. And so that piece has been done. So the operating piece for the expanded services is coming through Island Health directly to the CBTS. And we don't have any other funding at this point in time unless my colleague next to me has anything further to add, so.
Yeah, and I think we are getting funding from the regional district for some of our efforts in this regard, but not specifically for this project. The other question is, we're all, of course, looking forward to the day that we can close a Connect Center when we have proper facilities that are purpose-built and that process is underway. But what would be the plan for this facility once that does happen? And are there any ongoing costs and obligations that the city would have regarding maintenance of infrastructure and that sort of thing?
Mr. Garvin?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Hillian. That lot and the buildings that encompass, I think it's 3 lots that make up that area, is identified for future use for the city to leverage for future development. The ongoing costs would be the ongoing maintenance of the parking lot that we have had in the past and the decommissioning of that building, which was planned for quite a few years before we had the need and CBTS stepping forward to develop and deliver this essential community-facing service.
Right, and these are temporary facilities, so essentially they would be dismantled. Is that
correct?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thanks, Councillor Hillian. I don't see any further questions or comments. So if somebody would like to move, there's a recommendation, and that's it. So we'll just receive that unanimously. Thanks very much. We'll move on to 5.2.1 Integrated Rainwater Management Plan. And I'll pass it over to Ms. Tezioli, I believe.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today we're pleased to present the Integrated Rainwater Management Plan for adoption and implementation. This plan represents years of analysis and collaboration as we work to identify the capital projects, policy changes, and programs needed to manage rainwater in a way that protects the aquatic environment and reduces the impact of drought and flooding. So I will pass it over to our consultant, Laurel Morgan, Stormwater Sector Leader from KWL, to share more about the IRMP.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Janine. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you about the citywide integrated rainwater management plan for the city of Courtenay. Okay. So first of all, the development of an integrated rainwater management plan is essentially a process that the city goes through with the objective of looking at ways to better protect the environment, that is the natural water courses that receive runoff from the drainage system, and to mitigate the impacts of development, drought, and flooding that do affect those water courses. So we want to facilitate transition towards an integrated rainwater management approach for stormwater management to sort of shift the focus of how water is managed in the city, as well as implement objectives and policies from the official community plan for the city of Courtenay. So watersheds and stormwater systems. In a natural condition, pre-development, watersheds in this part of the world are forested. So they have intact vegetation and continuous soil across them. The effects of development are that forest cover, first of all, is reduced, but also that impervious surfaces are added to the ground. What happens then is that rainwater, when it falls on those surfaces, it runs off more quickly and more of it runs off rather than soaking into the ground. Therefore, there are impacts on the receiving waters from that development because the impervious areas through stormwater management, typical stormwater management like storm sewers, it's directly connected to the receiving waters. And so they see increased volumes and rate of flow coming into the water courses from the developed areas. So as land is developed progressively, that stormwater impact on the water courses tends to increase over time. So for the IRMP, we want to try to mitigate some of those impacts of stormwater on the receiving water courses. Some of those impacts include flooding, erosion of the waterways as the rates of flows increase for storm events, water quality as the development increases, more pollutants get added through non-point source pollution to the water courses. There's also drought, which have effects on the stream because less water is absorbed into the ground to feed the streams during the summer dry periods. And then overall, there are ecosystem impacts that affect wildlife and the biosphere of this environment around us. So the Integrated Rainwater Management Plan as a project was completed in 3 phases. The first phase was completed in 2019 and included preliminary stormwater modeling and capital plan program. Phase 2 was completed in 2020. It included a hydrological assessment, geotechnical assessment, and an environmental assessment. So lots of data collection and assessment. Phase 3 is what we have recently completed. Phase 3 included stakeholder engagement, completed a stormwater model of the entire city storm network. It included stormwater capital plan development. It included mitigation recommendations for mitigating the environmental impacts, and a strategy for implementation of all the recommendations of the IRMP. Including the last bullet on here is the stormwater funding analysis, which was completed as part of the work in order to look at the capital needs for implementation of all the recommendations. So the work for phase 3 was completed in sort of 3 parts. There's a rainwater management assessment that include reviewing available guidance and performance targets for rainwater management and stormwater management. Looking at the rainwater management targets for the city specifically and what would need to be updated in the city's policies, including the subdivision and development bylaw. There was also a water quality assessment to look specifically at water quality for the receiving water courses and the stormwater impacts to them. So that included a sampling program to look at water quality parameters and analysis of those samples to understand what the water quality impacts included, and identifying treatment targets and mitigations that can be implemented to improve the water quality for the water courses. And then the third part of this program included system assessment and upgrades. So an analysis was completed of the entire stormwater management system to look at where there were capacity issues and what pipe upgrades would be needed, and recommended upgrades based on future land use that was projected from the official community plan. So including changes to land use and densification, as well as climate change projections. So that includes increased rainfall that's expected as the climate continues to change over time. The capital program includes prioritization of capital upgrades. So they're ranked based on risk in order to be completed. So the highest priority ones can be completed first. And then sustainable, sorry, I can't read the bottom line. It's got a screen sharing thing over it.
The Zoom bar on there.
I think that just says sustainable funding for the projected annualized need for maintenance of the stormwater system. So the funding analysis included trying to understand what the annual need is for funding in order to not just complete upgrades, but to maintain the system in perpetuity. Oh, I don't think I have control anymore.
Oh, it's because, yeah.
Oh, sorry, it did go. Okay, so the recommendations coming out of the Integrated Rainwater Management Plan include, first and foremost, investment in capital upgrades. So the capital upgrades are required to prevent flooding and property damage. The projects in the capital plan were prioritized to address the areas that most need upgrade in the near term. The recommendations are that for those projects, the city would complete detailed design followed by construction. So each of those projects would need to be addressed individually as a complete project. The recommended upgrades include accounting for climate change and future development. And some of these upgrades include culverts, and those would provide the opportunity to correct things like perched culverts and other fish barriers along the creeks, like Morrison Creek that you've heard about. So the highest priority projects were separated into individual year suggested upgrades for the first 10 years of capital projects, with a total estimated cost of about $41 million. In following on the recommendations for capital upgrades, there are recommendations in the Integrated Rainwater Management Plan to allocate additional funding for stormwater management. The average annual capital spend for the city was about $143,000 between 2015 and 2022. This is quite low relative to communities of a similar size and density of infrastructure. And so based on a 35-year asset management plan for renewal of the storm assets, the total is $101 million that would be required for that. And an annual capital investment of $2.9 million is recommended. And the recommendation in the IRMP is that funding is necessary to keep the system functioning for the long term. Funding sources, the main recommendation is that increased allocation from general revenue be used in order to quickly allocate increased funding for stormwater management. Where possible, projects can be completed with development cost charges funding. So where they are development driven, there is an opportunity to use funds that are collected from development projects, as well as there are grant opportunities available, particularly for multi-benefit projects such as green infrastructure that can be implemented in the public realm. There are also recommendations for policy updates, primarily update to the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. So that includes coming up with specific wording to add to the bylaw for rainwater management. That includes volume-based rainwater management targets to be added to the current requirements, as well as adopting water quality targets, and specifically requiring that. There's also a recommended update to the 100-year climate change design storm on the basis that those infrastructure that require to be designed for the major event, the 100-year event, are generally very critical infrastructure, and to add some additional level of service to those for the future to address uncertainty in climate change. We have also recommended that specifications for absorbent landscaping be added so that vegetated and pervious areas function well for absorbing water as best they can and not generating runoff, and that the city adopt source control design guidelines for stormwater source controls and green infrastructure to make it easier to implement those types of infrastructure across the city. And that would support the recommendation to develop rainwater management source controls on public lands. So as density increases and stormwater runoff increases, there are increasing impacts to the local creeks and streams. Green infrastructure can help mitigate some of those impacts, particularly on the water quality and volume reduction side. So developing green infrastructure in the road allowances, parking areas, and finding locations where those can be implemented and provide not just treatment, but also green space and additional vegetation as a public amenity. As part of the integrated rainwater management plan, the recommendation to protect and enhance environmental values. And really this recommendation is to take advantage of opportunities as they arise to improve things like the fish barriers in creeks where perched culverts prevent fish from migrating, to restore degraded riparian corridors where development has encroached on the riparian corridor adjacent to the creeks, as well as to stabilize creek banks using bioengineering methods and green methods where possible in order to reduce erosion and prevent destruction of the habitat. There's also a recommendation to establish monitoring programs and adaptive management. And what this does is tracks the progress that the city makes towards implementation of the integrated rainwater management plan. The idea is to monitor and report on key performance indicators for the watershed health. These include some flow monitoring, water quality monitoring, green infrastructure performance, detention best management practices, and tracking the changes in impervious coverage across catchments throughout the city in order to be able to understand how things are changing. Recurring review and assessment of the monitoring data is critical to be able to understand how things are going. So collecting the data is great, but it is important to make sure that it actually gets reviewed. And exploring options to engage with the local watershed groups, such as the stream keepers, because they are often very happy to support the municipality on different ways of monitoring and tracking progress, so they can be a great ally. Which goes along with the recommendation for public engagement. So one of the things is that where there are sources of pollution, potentially things like roof treatments, nutrients from gardens and lawn maintenance, vehicle washing, pet waste. Public education is important to make sure people are aware of the impacts of discharging things into the streets and into ditches where they end up in the creeks and watercourses. Also supporting landowners who want to improve rainwater management on private lands and working with them to make sure that rainwater management provides the benefits that the municipality is looking for, as well as encouraging citizen science programs and public education just across the municipality. Engage people to get their support. Thank you very much. And I believe we are able to take questions at this point.
I hope so. Thanks so much for the great presentation and yeah, really appreciate some of those things, especially that community engagement side of things. I know when we moved here, we did approach the city about making changes and it was kind of left up to us and you know, we've gone to xeriscaping, but it took some time to figure out what that meant actually. So really look forward to that type of support. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, this might be a question for staff. Is that okay if we lump them all together?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. I remember when this came forward years ago, it seemed like we were ahead of the curve and now it's all in the news. You know, everyone's flooded out and everything's at capacity with all the rain. So it seems like we're just barely on top of it maybe. But this is exciting and looks like good work. I had a question about kind of the infrastructure in our downtown, which is highlighted, of course, in the presentation. So much hardscaping there. It's pretty much all paved over. And what the impacts will be sort of for development in downtown. You know, you want to put up a big building and the requirements that we're going to put through to take care of all that water could become onerous, I wonder, and if we've thought of that and how we're going to deal with that sort of thing.
Hang on one second.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. It is a consideration, and I will say that the onus on making the change is on what we do different going forward, but also on public infrastructure and on private infrastructure. So in the case of downtown, where it's already paved, I don't think we would expect any additional impacts, but there are those impacts that we may want to address. And so it would be a matter of developing these requirements with consultation and with our development community, and then also making use of the opportunity we have within our public right-of-ways, within our roads and our parks, to increase infiltration wherever possible.
That sounds reasonable. Thanks very much.
All right, and Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to both you and staff for the report and just the massive amount of work that this project represents. Yeah, it has been a fairly long process and I think it really deserves that. You know, rainwater management is a space that's really changing and evolving for cities, both in the way that we think about it and approach it, but also just the, you know, impending and current impacts of climate change. So I think it's really great that we have this in front of us and have some, yeah, some major capital work that is going to need funding. My first question is just around the asset management plan assumptions. There's a 35-year timeline that's highlighted in an overall cost of 101 million. And I just wanted to understand, does that 35 years represent how much we expect in terms of capital, or is that the expected lifespan of all the assets in this system that will be replaced in a 35-year time span? Like, the assumption is that a rainwater asset like a pipe or a culvert has an approximate 35-year lifespan. Is that, am I understanding that right?
No, not quite, but that's not your fault. It's just, it's hard to understand all of the numbers that go into that. The 35 years is really just an economic period that we look at for that assessment of assets, renewal of the assets, and then upgrades, and trying to fit it all into a time frame. We essentially use that 35-year time horizon as a way of setting a limit for when you want to have a lot of this work completed or on track, so that at that point it's just a normal moving forward, as opposed to where the city is right now, which is essentially in catch-up mode in order to get on track with maintenance and renewal of the system. In terms of the lifespan of stormwater assets, it can vary quite a bit, but for most of them, for pipes in the ground and for like concrete culverts, the lifespan is probably 75 to 100 years. So it's a much longer total lifespan for that infrastructure, which is one reason why we do incorporate climate change in the design of that infrastructure now, even though it may not happen for several decades.
Okay, yeah, that makes good sense to me because, yeah, I'm certain that we have assets in the ground that are much, much older than 35 years. So, yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, and then in terms of the capital plan, just glancing at, and I really only looked carefully at the next couple of years because of course that's what's in front of us. And some of the replacement costs for a culvert seem low and others seem kind of in line. And like I was looking at the Cumberland Road Piercy crossing versus the estimated cost on the culvert for what we just received a delegation on, and they're different by quite a lot. So what is included in that estimate, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question. And this is something that we've wrestled with. But because this assessment and capital program is put together on a citywide basis, we look at every single pipe that is recommended for upgrade, but we do it in a limited way. So there's only so much information we can incorporate in the costing for a study that is this broad at this point. So we include some information about each individual site, but it's quite limited. And therefore the costing may or may not be accurate for any individual location, really. We call it a level C estimate. And a more accurate estimate would be a level A estimate, but it requires a lot more work for each individual location to develop an estimate to that level. That would be done as part of the detailed design for each location for upgrade.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes good sense to me as well, but does it include like, I mean, when we're talking about replacing a culvert, are we also talking about the road impact at the time of the work as well as the pipe?
Yes, we have tried to incorporate that as best we could
Okay.
on the information that we have and sort of very broad look at all of these upgrades.
Okay, and then,
Mr. Davidson just had a
Okay.
comment as well.
Sorry, if I could just add as well, thank you for the question, through the mayor, to council. I'd say these cost estimates are very high level and they definitely do need some more work. They're based on some broad assumptions. May not be specific to our construction market, some challenges we face here on the North Island, and also limited in some of the inputs they have, lacking geotechnical information, lacking specifics that would really drive some of the costs for some of these things. So I'd say, yeah, good as a high level estimate, but certainly more work needed. Probably a scoping phase before we dove into detailed design.
yeah, thanks for that additional context. And then just another question related to that, because one of the slides did highlight that this plan also encompasses environmental enhancements that we would consider as we look at replacement. And is that additional work that's not included in the capital plan? Is that correct?
Yes, the capital estimates that have been completed are for the infrastructure upgrades only. So any additional environmental enhancement or habitat enhancement would be on top of that.
Okay, thanks.
So thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for this report. Nice to see you again. I feel like we've been on a journey together. Yeah, nice to see this come to at least initial completion for this phase. A lot to bite into. I do have a few questions of clarification, primarily as it relates to the major recommendation around the updates to the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. And so I guess I'm kind of curious here, and this might be more for staff. I'll let you figure it out. But as we look at updating the bylaw, which I think is coming up in our work plan, is this, just to get clarity here, is this stating here implementing a volume-based rainwater management targets? Is that a target that we would then include in the bylaw for the development industry to work towards? And I guess I'm curious here, you know, in follow up to Councillor Frisch's comments, there's conversation further down around the curve, the intensity, duration, frequency curve. And I'm wondering, and this might be something for you, what have we seen other municipalities as being the threshold of what is a reasonable amount of inclusion in a subdivision bylaw for industry to take on in terms of that 100-year Because I think it talks about the 50-year storm surge for the subdivision bylaw, but we know that in the modeling that you provided, that many of our pipes will also be required to have the 100-year to limit the potential impact of flooding. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that specifically, and you're recommending the 50-year in the bylaw, but yeah, I guess I'm trying to rectify how we actually manage for that 100-year flood for new development.
Okay, I may not understand one thing, but I'll try to respond and hopefully we'll get there. So for the updates to the bylaw that are recommended, not every municipality has those types of updates in their bylaw yet, but very many of them do. Particularly the larger municipalities are already requiring volume retention on sites in their bylaws, and they're requiring water quality treatment targets in their bylaws, as well as rate control, which is already in your subdivision and development bylaw, which is why there's no recommendation for adding that. It's already incorporated. Those, I think implementation may vary, but there are quite a lot of municipalities that already have instituted those requirements and are requiring that development meet those. There are variations in how they do it. What is recommended in the IRMP for the city of Courtenay is based on similar municipalities on Vancouver Island, and sort of the level of effort that is relatively common to this region and other municipalities in the region. Hopefully that addresses that portion of the question. You asked about the updates to the design storm that we recommended, where we have recommended an additional level of conservatism be added for the critical infrastructure, essentially for a design for the 100-year event. That is really because the infrastructure that is meant to carry the major event is often critical infrastructure. It's road crossings, or it's conveyance for areas that would otherwise flood and likely be damaged. And so it's meant to provide a level of service a little bit above what it might otherwise be. I'm not quite sure what the 50-year question is regarding.
The curve, the intensity, duration, frequency curve.
And Ms. Tedziole?
Thanks, Council. I'm happy to clarify on the intensity, duration, frequency curve. So this is a curve engineers use to size pipes based on historic rainfall events. And so it's found that a rainfall event that has a probability of roughly happening 1 in 50 years, which corresponds to a probability of 0.2 chance of happening in any given year. 2% chance of happening in any given year. Based on historic data, it is correct. Currently, our curve of historic storms is not prepared for the 100-year storm, which is like an atmospheric river or a bomb cyclone. And so we're proposing that we revise that curve so that we can be prepared for those much larger storms that may become more frequent. And to add to the comment regarding SDS bylaw updates, we would work with our development services team and engage in the development community just so they are aware of these revisions and are able to meet them.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that you've also added in the recommendation that design standards be included in the subdivision bylaw so that our industry partners will know what is expected of them. So I'm excited to see that come forward. I have another question, Mayor. That's okay. The component of the public land, so recommendation 3, I guess this might, again, maybe be for staff, but currently under the recommendations, especially under capital, it's specific to the culverts. And I think Councillor Morin kind of alluded to it in one of her questions, but curious, as we're imagining replacement of facilities, is this something that is going to be built into the design and the budgeting, the capital assessment for the replacement of facilities. I know the next item on the agenda is about a facility on Cousins Ave. And so just wondering if the intent here is that rainwater source control projects be included in all renewal of facilities going forward.
Thanks, Counselor. It's our intention that we identify suitable locations for green infrastructure within public right-of-ways and on public lands. Not all locations are suitable. So things that might not make it suitable is if you have a lot of industrial traffic, or if your subsurface soils aren't able to infiltrate the volume of water that may be running off. So there's some site-specific work needed to determine and verify which locations are suitable for those kinds of projects, and can be integrated seamlessly with our streetscapes.
Thanks, Councillor Zolliker and Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. So I guess using Councillor Zolliker's word, curiosity, around how we've been spending 143,000 and now we're finding that we need to bump up to 2.9 million annually. I guess I'm wondering how we're getting away, like, are we just dodging bullets here? Or I guess there will be some questions around that, you know, that huge increase and whether, you know, it's, I mean, I see in the, you know, underfunding is not sustainable, but I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a bit. And then I have maybe one or two other questions. Go ahead, Chris.
Yep, thank you very much for the question. It's a very good one. To the first point, how have we been getting along so far, as it were? Unfortunately, I would say we've been, divesting our existing assets. We've been developing an infrastructure deficit, unfortunately. So I would say the system has been deteriorating consistently without a sufficient level of renewal. So it's not a good story from an asset management perspective for the stormwater system, unfortunately.
So, so a catastrophe could happen at any, I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid by bumping this up.
Yes, that is essentially it. Specifically hoping to avoid environmental impacts, especially as Ms. Tazioli alluded to, storm frequency increases and impacts increase, and then also impacts related to flooding as well. So that's what we're trying to avoid. As far as how we might fund it, a bit of a challenging question. So there are a great deal of recommendations within the IRMP. We also have other master plans that make similar levels of recommendations. So all of these priorities need to be balanced against each other. And staff will work through the asset management program to develop a cohesive plan to hopefully incorporate all of it.
Yeah, well, that sort of segues into my other question, which was around the provincial role in this. I'm assuming that some of this work is driven by provincial regulations and standards. And so I would hope that they would have some money available as well. I guess I'm, curious how much, you know, what is the province, how does this plan compare to what the province is requiring of us?
So very much in alignment. We have followed provincial best practices and other industry standards to develop this plan. We are aware there is grant funding available for projects such as these. We also lobby our provincial partners with mixed success, but we are diligent in doing so. We're seeing more and more grants become available for flooding and disaster mitigation, and those naturally extend to stormwater management. So we're hopeful that we will be able to get some assistance in addressing this issue.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, we're finding in other areas where the province is not necessarily, is there a risk of the province not helping out if we don't have the proper infrastructure to help mitigate these extreme events that we're encountering?
I would think that risk is present, yes. Of course, we would look for support from council to lobby province at every available opportunity. We understand you're diligent in doing so. But yes, that risk is present. If staff did become aware of any significant immediate risks, that would be flagged up to be addressed immediately.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for this. There's anyway a wealth of really interesting information here, and I wanted to get ask a bit more about the total cost for some of the culverts. This was noted earlier. They vary in cost, and there is one a culvert under Comox Logging Road, which is just over $21 million. And there's a description explaining why it sounds like it's particularly complicated, but I'm wondering if one of the things that was considered is in extreme cases, whether you would just daylight the creek and remove the culvert and accept some interruption to the road. There is a culvert on Willamar, which was addressed earlier in the meeting, where seems to be our intent is just to remove the culvert and daylight it. I'm just wondering if that was one of the possible ways forward that you were looking at, or were you just simply assuming you'd replace like with like and then assess the cost?
Yeah, essentially, we are looking at just replacing the existing infrastructure with something similar,
Right.
is
Not
how it was
like,
approached.
Yeah.
The sort of breadth of the study doesn't really allow us to look at individual locations and incorporate all the considerations that would be needed to look at alternatives very much. So for the most part, it's really just if there is a culvert there. Currently, we looked at replacing it with a culvert, possibly a different type of culvert if it needed a significant upgrade. So some of them recommend a box culvert instead of a pipe culvert. But essentially it's just replacement. So alternatives such as replacing with a bridge or just taking out the road and daylighting the creek have not been considered at this level. But that would be considered for individual projects in looking at the opportunities and alternatives that might be available.
Okay, well, so just maybe to staff then, I assume as we get more granular with the plan, we'll be looking at things like this. So this particular culvert, I was trying to figure out where on Comox Logging Road. It looks like it's between the Parkway and the Ridge development. And from what I can see, you could interrupt that road and there would still be a way around. Anyway, clearly we'll discuss these on a case-by-case basis, but certainly an option to be considering.
Thanks, Counselor. And this is something that we would explore in detail as part of the detailed design process, where we would look at what alternatives may exist apart from replacing like for like. So as Laurel had mentioned, that could be a bridge, that could be daylighting. It really depends on if there's a critical, roadway or traffic connection there. And once we've determined what the best option will be, those costs will be refined in detailed design and then presented for council consideration in the financial plan. So at this point, these are not directly going to be entered into the financial plan. We'll do further detailed design, and then you'll see them as a line item on your financial planning for the 5-year time horizon.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Appreciate the context on that.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. Mr. Garvin.
Thanks. There was some conversation, a little bit of renewal, and if council wanted some information, Mr. Shaw's group is currently through the SIIP process. Could speak to that. Apologies for hitting my mic. We've got at council's discretion if you want to hear a little bit about that.
It's now an appropriate time. All right. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you for that. Just in addition to some of the great work that's been done here, just acknowledgement for the conversation around sustainable renewal investment numbers. Operations presented to council with a sustainable infrastructure plan, which included general taxation portions, which would include stormwater infrastructure. And so those numbers have been contemplated, not necessarily nearly to the degree that the work has been done here with this group and upgrades and extension to improving our systems, but for like renewals, those have been considered within that financial model and are currently sustained within the funding allotment that we're currently working towards. These numbers are fairly representative of our water and our sewer utilities, being 2.9 and 2.7 respectively on a historical or recommended annual investment number. So this number that comes from stormwater is quite similar to that, but just as an acknowledgement, when we talk about funding for long-term over periods, the Sustainable Infrastructure Investment Plan considers stormwater and it considers it within the overall value for this discussion for renewal only.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. There's obviously, well, we're very proud of our Fifth Street rain gardens. And there is an assessment here of them, but maybe you could help by explaining just how useful these are. And because I struggle to understand, like they seem like they're a great idea, but how much water are they really handling? Can we put them on every street? Do we want them on every street? And like, do you have an idea of how useful those sorts of facilities are in our system?
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. They are extremely useful in that they are opportunities for rainwater to interact with the soils beneath them. And so when we have concrete and paved surfaces, there's really no access for the rain to replenish the groundwater. And so providing that access is extremely important. But with that in mind, there's a number of ways that you can achieve that. So a rain garden is just one option of tools we call source control. So we can also use things like bioswales, permeable pavements, all sorts of tools. So I think that rain gardens as a concept are extremely beneficial. And one of the things that KWL analyzed as part of this project was the specific design elements of the Fifth Street Rain Garden. We understand that project to be one of the city's first. It was also a pilot project, so it's a perfect opportunity to learn how to best implement these citywide.
Yeah, it's kind of got me thinking about our downtown local area plan, and if there's a way that we want to dream a bit and you know, if we're talking about redoing roadways and whatnot, to use this sort of infrastructure, if you guys have thought of that. Sounds like a yes from your nodding. Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Two questions. First for Ms. Morgan. I'm just wondering if you can share with us, your title is Stormwater Sector Leader, which is, I don't know if we've always had a stormwater sector, but it's obviously a growing concern. I wonder if you can give us some comparison with where we sit in relation to other communities. You mentioned earlier that there's many communities that are further along. I wonder if you could give us some specifics about what communities of our size are dealing with in these times.
Okay, I can certainly try to do that. Yeah, sector leader is relative to our company. I head the stormwater sector within our company. We have about 30 people that focus mainly on stormwater management, and so I lead that group. So stormwater management in BC is a very interesting specialty, and for the province, it's interesting partly because the onus is on municipalities to determine how they will manage stormwater through the Local Government Act. The responsibility is delegated from the province to the municipality. There are a lot of municipalities, particularly in the Lower Mainland, that have commitments to the province through their liquid waste management plans to provide stormwater management in certain ways. And so there is that mechanism by which the province has some influence on how communities manage stormwater. Not all communities use that mechanism. So it's some do, some don't. But in the Lower Mainland, at least, there has been a requirement for municipalities to do integrated stormwater management planning across their watersheds, or at least across the developed watersheds, starting in about the year 2000. So this has been a progressive effort that municipalities have tried to tackle. Some have made more progress than others. The city of Courtenay is not by any means the last municipality to do this. There are plenty that are still working towards this or have not yet addressed it. I think in the Lower Mainland, because the liquid waste management plans there have essentially required that they address stormwater management through these integrated plans since 2000. They have made more progress there towards it. And so a lot of our examples are there. But I know that the city of Victoria as well has developed integrated rainwater management programs and has a whole, well, they have a specific name for it, rainwater management methods, I think, that they apply citywide on private and public property. And the city of Nanaimo as well has incorporated very similar performance targets for volumetric capture, water quality, and rate control in their bylaws. So they also require a similar level of stormwater management as some examples on Vancouver Island.
Thanks for that. And just as a follow-up, do we have any way of quantifying how much of this is related to climate change as opposed to what we might be doing under other circumstances?
Yes, we do. We haven't quantified that specifically as part of this work. It is possible to look at that, but maybe as a guideline, the climate change portion of the design storms that we use to assess and then to design upgrades for stormwater management conveyance, the increase in design rainfall is around 15% for the design events due to climate change. And that for the city of Courtenay is for the 2050 climate horizon. If we look further to the future, that would likely increase a bit more, but that is the current projection for the city.
Appreciate that. And then I had one question for staff, which relates to correspondence we received on Sunday from Fred Payne of Glen Urquhart Drive with a lot of questions. I understand that's been forwarded to staff, and a lot of those questions, I believe, have been covered already tonight. But I'm wondering if staff have further comments in response to that correspondence.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. In our response, I suppose the main question was around the costs, and the cost $1.1 million is a large amount, but that's the renewal.
101.
Or sorry, 101.
We can always dream.
Sorry. It's a large amount, and for that reason, that's the renewal cost for the system, and that would be taken or addressed piece by piece over time. And so that's what's proposed. And it's really at the discretion of council what that funding looks like. As we've talked about, there are short-term and long-term funding options. So short-term funding options would be things like provincial grants, things that would allow us to get started and get a couple of critical projects done. But because our stormwater system is an essential utility, we also need a permanent source of funding. And so that permanent source of funding could come from general taxation. A couple other options we looked at in the IRMP were stormwater utility, as well as a stormwater utility rate. And I think both of those options have their pros and cons. There's administrative costs to each of them. And so the most straightforward is general taxation. And I think those decisions and trade-offs are in the hands of council.
Yeah, thanks. Just one further comment, Mr. Mayor. The reason I asked the question about climate change is because I don't think the general public has yet grasped the reality of what we're going to be paying for the impact of the changing climate that we're seeing. And you know, I think it's important as we move forward with a plan like this, which is obviously costly, that we communicate that information, that a big part of the reason why we're having to spend this type of money over this length of time, and it relates to fire suppression and wildfire prevention, as well as other infrastructure issues, is because we're dealing with a rapidly changing climate and extreme weather events that are coming at us much more quickly than they were in the past. So I think that's important information to message out as we move forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I'd probably, add to that the fact that there was a real asset management deficit to begin with, in a general sense, not necessarily environmental ones, but just, again, all this stuff kind of snowballs and really leads to the only question, and I appreciate the discussion so far. Most of my questions were answered, but do sort of have one sort of question, and I think, like you said, it's going to come back to us anyways, but asset management as an example where we say this is how much we're going to put for asset management. Would the same idea be here, as long as it's not a utility, but if it's that general taxation, would be saying this is how much we think is required, just like we do with asset management kind of thing?
Yes, Mayor Wells. It's about understanding how much investment we need in our utilities to keep them in good working order. We have an existing system to maintain. And so if we want to provide that high level of service to the public, we need to make those consistent investments over time. Replacements that occur all at once age at the same rate. And so then we would have another large investment required at a future date. So really spacing that out over time can be a good strategy to help us manage that. And I will add that by investing in our infrastructure, we can manage the risk related to a change in climate. So there's a lot of uncertainty around what that might mean and the rain that we might receive. But if we ensure that our system is equipped to manage that uncertainty, we can avoid some of the worst impacts that we may otherwise face. And in that way, those upgrades pay for themselves in avoided damages in many cases.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Okay, I don't see any further. Councillor Hillian.
I was going to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Fantastic. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. Thanks for the great discussion around that. Next, we'll move on to the Cousins Avenue Road upgrades, and I'll pass it back to Ms. Tazioli, I believe. That sound right? Or Adam? Sorry, Adam. I'll turn Ms. Tazioli's mic off. And over to you, Mr. Pitcher.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm here to present a staff report on the Cousins Avenue Road Upgrades Project. This project is intended to address critical infrastructure needs in the area. Our team developed 3 different options, with option 1, the standard option, emerging as the recommended approach. It balances cost effectiveness, functionality, and public preference. Key features include new sidewalks, traffic flow improvements while maintaining parking, enhancing safety and accessibility for both the residential and industrial zones. So we have Alex McBride, our project manager from McElhaney, here to take us through a quick presentation.
Is it already on? Oh, yeah, we're good. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm here to present on the Cousins Avenue options analysis that McElhaney worked on over the last year. Adam kind of provided an intro there. Essentially, we're looking at the surface treatments or the above ground conditions of the corridor, as well as below ground improvements, which include utilities, sanitary, water, sewer. The main driver for these improvements is the condition of the roadway, which is now substandard. So a replacement is due, and it's a good time to look at everything below the ground as well. The project is generally located between Willamar Ave and 20th Street. The win on the slide here, detailed design, is actually slated for 2026 and construction in 2027. So there's the project map on the screen there. It's about 700 meters of roadway between 20th Street, which is kind of on the north side or the top left corner of the screen there, and Willamar Ave, which is in the lower right. You can see that there's a little legend on there that shows a green dotted line or dashed line. That represents the residential portion of the project area, and the orange dotted line represents the commercial portion of the project area. So this is a unique project for us to kind of tackle, because we're looking at 2 different types of uses, and so we have to consider more than just one type of user. Building on the managing of the mixed use, you know, we considered what the area needs from a commercial industrial traffic component, the design vehicles associated with that, the type of traffic, the timing of the traffic. And within the residential areas, you're looking at something slightly different, right? So that was a big component of the project here. And then parking was also something that we evaluated pretty heavily. I think there's known issues with parking in the Tin Town area, the commercial piece there. And so we did a parking study to evaluate that, where we kind of tracked parking conditions throughout, I think it was a Wednesday in July of 2023. And basically from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. kind of did a round of the corridor there and checked what the parking conditions were. I think the general outcome from that was that parking, on-street parking within the commercial industrial area was over capacity. And that means that with all the available spots that were out there, they were all taken and there was instances of illegal parking occurring. So that was you know, not necessarily unexpected to find. Then the on-street parking within the residential piece was under capacity, meaning that there was spots available throughout the day in any given hour. And then the results from looking at call it off-street parking or parking within the businesses themselves kind of show that some of those areas might have been underutilized, but I would caveat that with saying that a lot of times the businesses are reserving spaces for their customers, right? So we can't distinguish between employees parking or customers parking. So that was kind of just the general trends that we found there. So we evaluated 3 options and, you know, we kind of looked at the city's typical geometry requirements for a collector roadway, which is what the Cousins Avenue is classified as. And also looked at more current design standards for active transportation, as well as just best practices for traffic when you have mixed uses. So with that, we've generally recommended wider lanes. I think the city's standard is 3.2 meter wide travel lanes. We're looking at a minimum of 3.3, and within the industrial areas, 3.5 meters. And that's based on what we anticipate the design vehicles to be and providing that safe buffer for those vehicles to operate in that travel lane. There's increased boulevard space and street trees in all 3 options. We've proposed a raised crosswalk at the Cousins Park access. That both provides a safer crossing as well as can help with traffic calming as vehicles have to slow down to cross those. There's also the option to add additional speed tables similar to a raised crosswalk throughout the residential area. And again, that's aimed at keeping vehicle speeds low. There's also the option for curb bump outs, and that's kind of an encroachment into or towards the travel lane, and that this, you know, typically a narrower lane generates slower speeds from the users. So that's kind of the methodology there. So we've looked at a lot of different options to try to facilitate a safer environment and passage for both, or sorry, not both, pedestrians, cyclists, as well as vehicles. So you can see on this screen, better on the smaller screens actually with the flags there, but this is the standard option, option 1. So it's quite similar in nature to the city's current bylaw, with again those modifications to travel lanes. We're looking at 1.8 meter wide sidewalks and parking and boulevard spaces on both sides of the street. There's already road signage out there to limit truck traffic, but we would probably enhance that to kind of provide that barrier and limit the amount of truck traffic that goes through the residential area. On to option 2. Option 2 is the bike lane option. So in this one, again, the travel lanes don't really change. It's 3.3 meters in the residential area and 3.5 meters within the industrial. You've got sidewalks and boulevards on both sides of the street. The trade-off here is that, you know, if in adding 2 bike lanes, you'll have to reduce the width of something. So parking is limited to one side. So now there's a reduction in parking. And then the boulevard widths also get lowered, generally by like 0.2 meters. And again, the limiting factor for truck traffic is signage on that one. And then option 3, you know, looking more at active transportation as a key element here, and then also introducing a one-way option for a portion of Cousins Ave. This option has parking on both sides of the road, so no change to parking. Within the residential piece of the project area, we have a multi-use path on one side of the road, and that would extend from 20th Street to the Cousins Park access. So kind of catering to the access of the park there. And then there's one-way traffic for a section of Cousins immediately adjacent to Rosewall Crescent, and I'll show a diagram of that. So there's some red arrows there on the roadway. Basically, as you're entering the project area from Willamar, which would be on the far right, you have 2-way traffic up until you reach the Rosewall Crescent, the call it easterly access there of Rosewall Crescent. And at that point, that's where it starts to change to one-way traffic. And so that one-way traffic then funnels industrial traffic onto Rosewall Crescent to then go back out towards Willamar. If there's non-commercial industrial traffic, they can continue on the one-way towards 20th Street there. So vehicles trying to enter this area from the 20th Street access would be limited or prevented from entering the area based on this one-way configuration. So there's no interruption to the residential access and everyone accessing their driveways, but it does limit them from accessing the Tin Town or the businesses along Cousins Ave in this circumstance. So the option to look at or pursue a one-way configuration for a portion of Cousins Ave has obvious implications on Rosewall Crescent. So we've looked at you know, the potential that Rosewall Crescent could maintain its current 2-way traffic direction, which if anyone's driven on Rosewall Crescent, you know that you're inevitably going to be waiting for someone to get by you just because the parking's really tight and vehicles are often trying to use the same passageway to get between the vehicles. So directing industrial traffic into that already existing conflict area, it could be quite tedious. So there's a option to also change Rosewall Crescent to one-way traffic, which is the diagram there on the right side. And so vehicles could enter from the north entrance to Rosewall Crescent, closest to 22nd Street there. And they would then loop around and then exit back out towards Willamar. So that would take care of the majority of the industrial traffic in the area. There is a small amount of, I think it's maybe up to 5 properties that are kind of still in that one-way area as you approach the Cousins Park access, that they would have to continue to go out towards 20th Street. So it would severely limit the commercial traffic. However, you would still see some going through there just based on the nature of how we're limited out here. Just to kind of highlight on the parking front there. So option 1, again, it maintains the existing parking configuration. There's no changes to the spots available. Option 2, there's a reduction in on-street parking, and that's to accommodate bike lanes. Option 3, the Cousins Avenue doesn't see any changes to the on-street parking. However, we anticipate that there would be reduced parking available on Rosewall Crescent, and that's to support larger commercial industrial vehicles going through that corridor. There's a couple of tight turns in the area that we've evaluated from an engineering perspective and determined that you may lose a couple spots as a result of trying to facilitate those movements. So I'll note here, not in the slides, is we held a public open house in October of 2023. With that, there was a survey. And so we were able to gather a lot of great public input. And that kind of helped inform, what some of the common themes are. We also took the engineering approach and evaluating what, we as engineers think those themes ought to be from a safety and design perspective. So the themes and design criteria shown in this table are kind of derived from all of those various inputs. And then we have the options there, and we kind of rank them on a scoring system where 0 basically means that you're maintaining the current level of service, no significant change to that theme or that design criteria. A negative score means that there's a decrease in functionality for that specific design criteria. And then a positive score means that you're improving on existing conditions. So we try to make it balanced and fair so that it's not so subjective, and kind of assign those scores there. So, I can go really quickly through each one here. The traffic calming on Cousins Avenue, all of them kind of scored pretty similar. Option 3, we say that traffic calming is less so because you're introducing a new type of traffic pattern, right? Which inevitably has issues in the early days as people adjust to the new traffic patterns, but eventually everyone will kind of get the swing of it. Traffic calming on Rosewall Crescent. We saw across option 1 and option 2, no considerable impact. On option 3, obviously, with the one-way configuration, we're routing a substantial amount of industrial and commercial traffic through the area that didn't see it before. So that's why it got a negative score. Maintaining or improving on-street parking, I've kind of spoken to this already, but option 1 just maintains existing. Option 2, we're seeing a reduction in parking, so that's why it gets the negative score. And then option 3, again, no changes to parking on Cousins Avenue. Improvements to pedestrian safety. I think all 3 options really kind of add elements in there to enhance pedestrian safety. None of them truly stand out as being more of an improvement than the others. So all of them have a positive score in this regard. Cyclist safety, option 1, we see no change to the cyclist safety. Option 2 clearly is going to have a high score because it's adding bike lanes to the area. It is noted that the project corridor is not within the 2023 cycling network update. So this area was never slated to have bike lanes. The introduction of them, while it does produce a benefit, it's not one that was previously identified as needing that. And then option 3, again, I think I show a slight increase to cyclist safety, and that's because of that multi-use path that's in the residential area there. Improvements to vehicular safety, all 3 options provide a similar level of improvement, and that's mostly because we would be delineating the lanes and the parking areas. So it provides more of a framework for users to see where they are supposed to be and how they should operate within the corridor. Traffic volumes on Cousin Avenue, there's no real changes on option 1 and option 2. With option 3, we're seeing an improvement within the residential area due to decreased industrial and commercial traffic. So that's why it receives a higher score there. Traffic volumes on Rosewall Crescent maintained through option 1 and option 2. Within option 3, again, where we were adding traffic to that corridor, and therefore that's why it got the negative score. All of the options have increases in green space, which is a positive. And then option for impacts to businesses, option 2, adding bike lanes complicates some of the operations of the industrial and commercial areas. In option 3, obviously the impacts to the business they would have to follow a traffic pattern that's less ideal for them. And then operations and maintenance costs across the board would be pretty consistent, and it gets a negative score there just because you're increasing the infrastructure, so you have more to maintain. So with that, we're seeing option 1 as being the top scoring option at 7, and option 2 and 3 being close behind at a 5. And then the results from the public open house as well showed in favor of option 1, with option 3 being close behind as well.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Appreciate the presentation tonight. The one question while I'm waiting for lights to come on, we're, because when we're talking about reconfiguring one-ways and all that, whether or not anyone in that area was, chatted with to see what their thoughts were. I realize we're making decisions, but that was the one question I had.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a topic that came up during the public open house and was made pretty clear in our materials, is that option 3 did include that traffic change. And I think the consensus, I heard is that, within there's benefit to the residential areas, but obviously impacts the businesses.
Right.
Yeah.
So
in Rosewall Crescent as well, right?
All right. Okay, thanks. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the report. Seems pretty clear to me. The only question I had was in the drawings, if we can go back to option 1, if that was intentional that in the industrial area in the drawings for option 1, there was no trees in the image. Is there a rationale for that? Is that intentional? And I think if there's stark contracts in the residential section, cross section, there are trees in the boulevard. So is there
I would attribute that to a drafting error. The trees should be there. Yeah.
Okay, so there'll be, the plan would be that there'd be some trees across the whole section of Cousins.
Correct. I mean, you have to look at the driveway and the frontage access, and that would be the limiting factor for boulevards and trees. But wherever we can place street trees, it makes sense to do so. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, if I may, through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur, you have to be very intentional in industrial areas on those attributes, because they can be easily damaged and they become a significant barrier. So there's a balance between public realm and private realm there. There's development permit guidelines. But I want to be actually clear, having had to do with number of development permits in this area specifically, those are very impactful on an infill industrial area. And it does have site limitations. And in the past, the city has got a lot of feedback from industrial property owners about the implications of some of those things. So not necessarily trees, there will be some component of landscaping as part of compliance there. But I just wanted to jump in because Chris and I had a specific conversation about that. Knowing council has a strong interest in street trees, and we have our urban forest program just within industrial areas, and especially this area because of its alignment and adjacency, that street trees are a bit of a challenge. So it would be on a situational basis.
All right, thanks for that. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, a similar question about the boulevards. Are we looking, you said some sort of treatment, are we talking about like grass or, in some places we've actually used AstroTurf. We thought about what that's going to look like and how that's going to function in those industrial areas with trucks kind of driving all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, because this was just the options analysis stage, we haven't really got into the actual treatments that would be out there. It's more of a reservation of green space. And I think just like was just mentioned here, that we'd have to look at the applicability of
it could be like gravel or rocks or who knows.
I mean, it would be ideal to be green, but it's just going to depend on what's there and the vegetation, typically there's some prescription, but that would typically be dealt with a detailed design.
Right, thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Davidson?
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna say that would be dealt with that detailed design. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. Thanks for that. Councillor Moran.
Thanks, Mayor. I was curious, I was looking in the survey results. I know you've got a breakdown of 40% of respondents lived in the area, but of course there are people who live in the area and have a business, like particularly on Rosewell Crescent. I just wondered, did you feel that your breakdown compared to residents, compared to business owners was kind of similar, or, was it lopsided in any way? And did you break it down where people had a business and lived there as well? Because, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Pitcher. Oh, hang on. There we go.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so the public open house was very interesting. It's mixed use there. So we would hear a lot from the business owners who felt really strongly in certain regards, and then we would hear from people in the residential area who felt very strongly as well. So it was a good exercise to do this open house, because there was a lot, we heard a lot of different feedback, I would say, and via that people felt strongly about parking, parking and vehicle traffic in some areas was very important, and then in the residential areas, we heard a lot of feedback that it was less important. So we heard a lot of feedback, I would say.
Thanks. It's my old neighborhood, so I was just curious. Yeah, who was most vocal there? Thank you.
But you guys made it out alive, so that's reading between the lines. Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. I lived in Willamar for a lot of years, and my neighbor had a towing company that operated on Cousins. And gradually, Tin Town got built, the area got busier, and I was actually there on a business walk on Thursday with the Chamber of Commerce, and parking is quite simply is a nightmare. The road conditions in some cases are described as brutal. And we've heard about congestion in this area for quite some time. So, I think we're long overdue to move forward with this, and I'm really glad to see this plan coming forward today. For a moment, I was really hopeful when I saw the timeline with detailed design and construction next year. But obviously, that's not the case. So I do have a question regarding that. But first of all, I want to clarify what you said about the signage for trucks, because I may have missed it, but I couldn't find anywhere in the report where it's clearly specified what that intent is. Or are we planning to limit truck traffic through the residential area?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to this a bit. I think there is signage shown on the drawings themselves. So if you're looking at the options, and there should be signage shown and labeled. I think there is a signage up to prohibit truck traffic within the residential areas, which is generally between 20th and 22nd. There's no physical limiting factor, though. There's no physical obstruction for them moving through that area. So, it's whether or not someone adheres to a sign, I think, is the issue. And then so option 3 with the one-way traffic is taking it to that next level of saying, here's a physical barrier from that actually happening. But that obviously has a ripple-on effect on other infrastructure as well.
But the intent would be for trucks that come down 20th Street from Cumberland Road to follow right down to Willamar and loop back up to 26th Street.
Yeah. Access from Willamar. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. So the other question, given that we're not going to repair the road for another couple of years, I wonder if Mr. Shaw might like to share the information that he shared with me earlier today when I asked the question about whether or not we could, in the interim, fix some of the potholes on Cousins.
Mr. Shaw.
It's a great question. Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Hillian. Yeah, it obviously a challenging road. We articulated quite early on in this presentation that the road is at and past likely its useful life, and so it's deteriorating quite rapidly. It's actually extremely challenging from an operational perspective to maintain it post inclement weather events, especially as we go through the winter seasons, through snowfall and ice and freeze thaw cycles. So some preventative measures that have been taken place thus far in anticipation of this upcoming work. Really, I'm just prefacing the reason why it hasn't been repaved to date, knowing full well that this work was anticipated and planned within the financial fiscal plan and the capital works plan for the city. There was some crack sealing that was done most recently in previous years, but we still obviously from time to time see potholes arise. And so we are actively working with our operational staff to respond to those on a case-by-case basis, knowing that this is a weaker asset within our inventory. There are regular routine visits to the area. And as Councillor Hillian alluded to, operationally, we are going to deploy in the coming weeks a crew dedicated to pothole repairs in that particular corridor in anticipation of our winter season.
Thanks, Mr. Shaw, and thanks, Councillor Hillian, for the question, and Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to comment that I'm really happy to see the attention to the pedestrian safety. As was noted in some of the comments, it's a very, although Cousins is obviously industrial, there's a lot of greenway and trails that connect to that area, and there are a lot of pedestrians, and of course there's Creekside Commons, the trail that comes through there, and people come down to the great cafe there. So I'm really happy to see that. And it can be quite a racetrack through there. So I'm glad that we were able to incorporate, even though we're keeping with sort of the standard no frills kind of option, that we are paying attention to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moran and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one other question. I know that the report wasn't primarily focused on this, but you did mention the parking issue. And I wonder if there are any options to create additional parking in there and reduce some of the congestion caused by the current parking arrangements. And I think the answer is probably no.
I mean, from what we can see from just an engineering perspective, the available parking that's out there now is maximized. And I think that was recently, Rosewall, I think, was recently signed in 2023 to kind of help identify where that legal parking is. And, in our walkthroughs of Cousins Avenue, we didn't see any missed opportunities for parking on the street. If you're going to be looking at increasing parking capacity, it would have to be within a property itself, right? And maybe acquiring a property to do a parking lot, but I don't see anything else. Maybe Adam has something he can say as well.
I was just going to add to that, it's the reason, excuse me, why we emphasized parking in the evaluations matrix, because we heard from, especially in the business areas, parking is obviously at a premium there, and we had to emphasize that. And so then you see the reduction in the evaluations matrix on any option that reduces parking there, because it's very difficult to create any more parking there.
Yeah. I guess when Tin Town was built, and it's an incredibly unique business and community there, they maybe didn't anticipate how successful it would become and the challenges that would be created. It's probably unfortunate that if we don't put any bike access in there, because that might actually decrease the number of vehicles. But I do agree with going with option number one based on the feedback from the people who actually live there. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Mr. Well, I'll go to Councillor McCollum then.
Yeah, I think there's no other lights on, so I'd just like to move the recommendation.
Thank you. All right, it's been moved. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries, and we'll move into operational services, Dove Creek Road closure request. And I'll do a time check as well. We are at 6 o'clock, so we'll be taking a break momentarily. So, Mr. Garvin.
Thank you through the mayor to council. So this is an important report that came forward, and I think it has quite an innovative solution. I think just recognizing the timeline, but we don't want to short shrift kind of the amount of work that happened here. Mr. Shaw has some very brief statements, as the staff report is very clear on options to address the issues that are raised here.
All right, thanks. And thanks for bringing this back for consideration.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to members of council. I don't know how brief I'll be. I typically have a tendency to be a little bit longer winded, but I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. I'm pleased to present the staff report here today for Dove Creek Place, which was the request for the road closure. So the purpose of today's report is to present council with the results of the analysis work and the consultative outcomes relative to the request to restrict public access to Dove Creek Place, and also to seek council's direction on the proposed limited use option. So at the May 8th council meeting, residents from Dove Creek Place provided an overview of the ongoing misuse of the road, the ditches, the adjoining multi-use path that run along Dove Creek Place. The residents went on to request council to consider the closure of the cul-de-sac portion of the road by means of barricade. So in short, the staff report provides an overview of the consultative process, including engagement with the residents, adjacent property owners, key stakeholders, including the CBRD as owners of the exhibition grounds. The proposed concept design aims to check several important boxes, including responding to the request to restrict vehicle access while maintaining seasonal public access to trails, swimming opportunities, equestrian use, while also maintaining utility, including BC Hydro and TELUS, CBRD, municipal maintenance operations, and emergency service access. The design itself aims to facilitate the future restriction of public vehicle access to Dove Creek Place by the installation of a standard municipal gate. The gate is recommended to be installed just past the secondary entrance to the exhibition grounds at approximately the 125-meter mark of the roadway, thus maintaining compliance within the city's subdivision design standards, or SDS. In addition to the restrictions, staff are recommending that a bi-directional multi-use path, or MUP, be constructed along the existing alignment within the corridor that would enhance active transportation and equestrian use. And lastly, the CBRD would be provided with access to the extent of the road network, to provide field access during events or during routine maintenance activities. The negative to this proposal, it's understood that through development of this proposal that the impact to the landowner's driveway and access would be restricted. However, through discussions with the private landowner, they have agreed in principle to assume all costs associated with the reconstruction and movement to facilitate this design. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that council may have.
Thanks very much. And Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the report and approaching this from trying to find an innovative solution to an unusual problem. I definitely prefer what's recommended here to closing the cul-de-sac, because it looked to me like we would close the cul-de-sac and then build a similar structure in front of it, which might not actually solve the problem that we're trying to solve. One thing I'm not clear about is what the utility of the 3-meter path would be, because it's essentially a dead end road with 2 driveways on it. So could we not just create an easy way for equestrian and walking use? I mean, I imagine maybe the odd bike goes down there, but does it really require a path, or what's the thinking around the path? Because it seems to me it is almost a walking path just by cutting off vehicle use.
That's a great question. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor McCollum. So the preliminary design works that have been presented thus far are really utilizing the road network in the way that you suggest, by providing limited access at the front end, which is a portion of the road, and then opening it up to pedestrian access. Through the design and through consultation with the CBRD, it's understood that seasonal access may be required or requested within that time frame. And so providing either a painted laneway, which basically articulates or depicts the MUP within the road surface. We're actually putting in concrete barriers that provide that physical barrier and the protection for the equestrian users as well as cyclists or pedestrians along that corridor. If they are asked to park at the top end of what is now Dove Creek Place, there's about a 200-meter walk to get back to where you would otherwise disembark from a vehicle or a bike to get into the multi-use area or the pathway. So there's a bit of a walking space there. And so we just want to do our best to protect those users while they're engaged in those activities. If there is vehicle traffic that's moving back and forth to drop people off or pick people up as they move through the corridor.
So, and I guess that if we would put in a barrier, then that would also prevent people from parking in that area that's intended for a different purpose.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, by doing that and adding the MUP within the road corridor, the road cross section, we actually reduced the available lane width to about 5.5 meters, which is still reasonable for traffic to cross back and forth, but it's at its absolute minimum. So we wouldn't want people to travel across or over into the cycling or the MUP area that may otherwise inflict negative opportunities of interaction.
And how much of the proposed cost does that treatment represent in the recommendation?
That's another great question. So preliminary design work, we've estimated between $40,000 and $50,000 in addition to do the MUP work, which would be inclusive of all the barriers, the painted line work, the safe crossing at the exhibition ground entrance, taking it right out to the front of the corridor where there's already existing equestrian trails adjacent to the ministry's corridor. So the concrete barriers themselves would be the bulk of that cost. The cost could actually be quite reduced in words of $10,000 to $15,000 if we were just to do paint and maybe some delineators and some thermoplastic to note the crossings and the safe passage. So it's the majority of it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Chilukuru.
Yeah, I was going to move the recommendation, but that actually made me think of another. So just in terms of the other treatment that you just spoke about at the end, the painted lines and the reflectors? I just curious because delineators, thank you. The theoretically vehicle traffic in that cross section should not be going very fast. It's quite a small, and concrete barriers are quite protective for pedestrians and cyclists. I'm just wondering in terms of that negative impact of the interaction between people who are utilizing the MUP and people who are in their vehicles. Yeah, why the concrete barriers versus maybe another, especially considering there's an increased cost?
Yeah.
And does that include maintenance? I guess what's the maintenance cost of concrete barriers versus the other treatment?
It's a fair question. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councilor Jolicoeur. The concrete barriers in this particular instance are really as a result of the restrictions that will be imposed within the vehicle travel lane. It would be at its absolute minimum, and so we'd want to protect that pedestrian or MUP access as best as we can through this process and through this design. You are correct that we would be limiting the speed. The speed would be much reduced in terms of volumes as well. In addition, but really it's about the available space and the available opportunities for movement, and then restricting parking within the area. It's not a highly visited area in terms of I shouldn't say that. We don't anticipate it to be highly visited in terms of parking because we want to provide additional parking at the front end, but we want to prohibit that parking or that opportunity for people to do park along the roadway if it were open seasonally. And so that would provide that physical restriction for them doing that, and then thus reducing the amount of callouts from a bylaw perspective, respond to actually remove vehicles or ticket vehicles that were illegally parked within an MUP. I will add as well, there is a therapy riding school that is working out of that area, and so there is there's actually quite a bit of equestrian usage within the area, and so that extra physical barrier for the horses to feel comfortable as they move through the corridor, and for the riders to feel comfortable to move through the corridor, that they actually feel as that there's not going to be an impact or an opportunity for crossing between vehicles, provide an extra degree and level of comfort in this particular case.
Thanks very much. Councillor Moore.
Great. Excuse me. Thanks, Mayor. Few questions. One of them being the gate hours. I think it was in the report that the gate will be open from dawn to dusk. Is that correct?
It's correct. It's part of the options. It's part of the resolution to support myself to work with the CVRD to understand their needs. I do hearken back to a report that was brought to the Electoral Service Area Board about providing as much access to river, especially within that particular area. And so that was part of my dialogue with the CVRD to ensure that we weren't negatively impacting some of the works that they're working on and some of the commitments they've made to the electoral areas.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, if there are some yahoos there, they're probably there generally later at night. I guess, I know this report is about the, you know, what we're gonna do about the access but it's because of the problems that the residents are having. So I'll get to that in a second, but I'm curious whether there was outreach, you know, there was outreach to the residents in the area, but was there outreach to the equestrian community or anybody else in terms of folks who use that road? And you did mention that it is a popular access point to the river, so just wanted to ask about that. Thanks.
It's a fair question. Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Moran. The outreach to date from a staff perspective has been from a government to government perspective as to the CVRD, inclusive of understanding their needs relative to the area, being an adjacent property owner. As well as the single property owner that lives on the other side. The relationships with that property owner with the adjacent users and the user groups is quite robust. And so I've been heavily reliant on that relationship to facilitate conversations between the groups. And I do understand that through those conversations that there is a positive towards what is presented here today.
Okay. So I guess you know, there's been a little bit of criticism around, I guess, not related to this report, but just in dealing with some of the problems that have happened in that area in terms of, you know, intimidation and other kind of activity and things like that. But I think one of the aspects that was highlighted in the report was that there's a lot going on in this. This is a park. This is, you know, there's residents there. I'm just wondering if you can speak to that sort of the challenge around the kind of multi-issue, multi-jurisdictional aspect of this and why it's been a little bit more complex. Recognizing that you've come up with a really great, I think, compromise.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is a complex situation. There are a ton of variables that went into the review of this, understanding not only the misuse that occurs on the road, but respecting where the road was historically as access to the bridge and now in a cul-de-sac format. So the usage of that road has diminished quite rapidly, quite extensively from its former, still providing great opportunities for access to the river and to green space. There's a high degree of equestrian trails that are highly used by the groups that enjoy that area. There's utility corridors that exist as a result of the old road network was there. So there still are utility poles and access requirements from BC Hydro and TELUS that we need to maintain. Fire services was a huge part of this conversation as well. Chief McDonald provided his concurrence on this as well. We wanted to make sure that we had kind of covered every basis as we went through this. Our own, bylaws in terms of subdivision development, we wouldn't design a road in this particular way. The one that was left for us through the ministry, through the removal of that bridge, was to our standard. And so we want to respect and maintain and understand that. So this is a fairly creative solution that provides the most benefit to the most impacted individuals, and something that the city from an operational perspective can support ongoing.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to hear that the resident is willing to, contribute to redesigning the driveway and that kind of thing. And I guess, we want to come up with a compromise. We definitely, there's very few access points to swimming holes, as we know, and yeah, I mean, we're hoping to expand on that. But we also recognize that this resident has been having a lot of problems, and hopefully there will be some, this will be something that will mitigate the situation. But it sounds like there still will be access and access during the day, so that's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Councillor Frisch.
Maybe with the recommendation.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. And so at this point, I did pose a potentially aggressive time frame for our meeting this evening. We do have folks from the Sid Williams here. My guesstimation is that we'd be at least a half an hour, if not more, given the 20 slides that they have. So unfortunately, I think we're gonna, I'm just taking the temperature of council. And
Sitting patient for a number of hours.
yeah, it's 20 slides. I'm not sure if you looked at the slides, and I know there's like intros and question slides, but it is. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. We're gonna take a break, 20 minutes island time. So we'll get back as quick as we can and get back. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right, welcome back, everybody. Looks like everybody's ready to get going again. And I will, we're gonna move on to 5.4.1, the Sid Williams Theatre Society Agreement and discontinuation of the theater surcharge reserve. And I'll pass it over to Ms. Jan.
Thank you to the mayor and council. I would like to introduce Richard Clark, the president of the Sid Williams Theatre Society, just to provide an update on the Sid Williams Theatre operations.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So you've had dinner. Now it's time for a performance. So you'll notice that we're a 2-act show this evening. I'm your first act, and our wonderful general manager, Deborah Rentz, is the second act. And in the gallery supporting us is a fellow board director and an incoming treasurer, Eric McDonald. So, all right, we're here to support the staff report to council. I'm pleased to say that at this point, the Sid Williams Theatre Society is weathering the post-pandemic era reasonably well. Without question, and except for Taylor Swift, it is a challenging time for the performing arts spaces, and as we all know too well, music festivals. And I'll come back to that in a few moments. We have been working with your staff. Need it over here? Okay, sorry. We have been working with your staff over the past 18 months or so to review our existing agreement and license to operate and update them to better meet current realities. I would like to express our appreciation to Joy and Susie and your legal team for their professional service and assistance. I am confident that the new agreement and license to operate will serve both the city and our society well going forward for the next 5 years. The SID, like other theaters, faces a double-edged sword. Costs of everything associated with live performances have escalated sharply. While the consumer price index has increased by close to 25% since we signed the last agreement back in 2017, the cost increases in our sector are estimated to have increased by more than 30%. At the same time, inflation has reduced the purchasing power of the theater, our clients, and the patrons we serve. That leaves us with the challenge of balancing the need to cover our operating costs while keeping the utilization and attendance at the theater both affordable and full. Fortunately, most, but not all local performing groups have also weathered the pandemic storm and have been able to return to in-person performances. Touring artists and groups are back on the road, and our patrons are continuing to return to the SID. However, many folks have less discretionary income and are having to choose more carefully what they can attend, so it's not clear how this is going to play out going forward. The good news is that our 23-24 operating year did see a return to near pre-COVID activity. As you can see on the slide, we had 161 performances compared with 164 back in 2018 and just 35 in 2021. Attendance was back to near normal, 44,000 plus, just less than the 45,000 in 2018. And our overall bookings, we're back up to 230, slightly less than our all-time high of 239 in 2019. And we were the third busiest professional theater space on the island last year. One of our key performance indicators is that with respect to our annual operating budget, the SID aims to generate 60% of our revenue from our own activities and rely on funders for the remaining 40%. Except for the heart of the pandemic, we have been able to do that. The challenge going forward is to grow both self-generated revenue and funders' contributions to keep up with the unavoidable cost increases. We are, as you might expect, of course, watching our expenditures wherever we can. And we are taking steps to increase our revenue. This is included what I'm going to bill as modest rent increases, coming changes to our liquor license, and we are days away from a soft launch of a new legacy gift program. We've also entered into joint production agreements with commercial producers to bring performances to the theater, sharing in the risk and the revenue. And we have continued our policy of reduced rental rates for community-based nonprofits. The federal and provincial agencies have increased their support, as have both Comox and the electoral districts, and Cumberland has it on their radar. We are pleased that the staff report recognizes our dilemma and has recommended an increase in Courtney funding over the duration of the new agreement. The recommendation does include a small annual increase in the operating grant, as in the current agreement, which we do appreciate. However, I must point out that over the past 7 years, that did not keep pace with inflation, and I'm concerned that it may not going forward. Last fall, when we appeared before council, we shared our new 3-year strategic plan, and as you may recall, our vision for the theater is an inclusive space to gather, inspire, and cultivate live performance magic in the Comox Valley. One of our goals is to ensure that our theater is welcoming to all, and one of the ways that we do that is our Superstar program, which, thanks to our members and donors, we were able to gift more than 500 tickets to members of our community who would otherwise not be able to attend. Despite the current challenges, we are working to implement our strategic plan, and we have used that plan to inform our input into the city's strategic cultural plan consultations. And we are pleased to see that some of our concerns and interests are reflected in the draft plan, and we look forward to working with the city and the arts community on the realization of that final plan. And finally, next year, 2025, will mark the 25th anniversary of the Sid Williams Theatre Society taking on the operation of the theater. We, that is the city, and our society have much to be proud of and to celebrate. Thank you for your time, and happy to take any questions, or we can leave them till after Act 2. Your call.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Ms. Chen, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Through the mayor and council, the purpose of the staff report is to approve the attached license to occupy and management operating grant for service agreement. The agreements, like in past agreements, will formalize the Sid Williams Society responsibilities in the management and operation of the theater and detail the city's in-kind and financial support. Now, the society has been a core cultural service provider since 2000 in providing professional management of the community and professional performance theater. The license to occupy includes a 5-year term with 3 options to renew, subject to the approval of council. It also has updated insurance provisions and clarified responsibilities for repairs and maintenance and future capital upgrades. The financial implications are that we are proposing a gaming funded increase from $105,000 to $130,000 per year. This is in response to the society's request for increased funding towards inflation and rising operational costs, and trying to provide financial sustainability for the society. The tax funded portion remained increased at 2% per year. This is consistent with other agreements with cultural partners. In terms of the ticket surcharge reserve, discontinuation of that, the reserve amount is currently about $57,000. The funds would be transferred to the society for use for theater equipment and capital building projects. The language has been added to their agreements to ensure that the funds are restricted to those expenditures. And it's also been, language has been added to clarify that anything purchased with those funds will belong to the city and our city assets. So we have 2 recommendations for council to consider. The first is for the agreements, and the second is for the discontinuation of the theater's ticket surcharge. And we're open to questions now.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Maybe while I'm waiting for some lights to turn on, the obvious question I think would be, you talked about Cumberland having this on their radar as something to support. Does that mean it's not in their budget yet?
It was not in their current year's budget, and we'll see what happens in next year's budget.
Fair enough, fair enough. And I love the way you've broken down the percentages of where people are coming from. So it's quite clear that folks in Cumberland are enjoying this. So Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. I was curious about the surcharge and where that fits in comparison to other communities. I mean, it seems kind of low to me. I mean, I buy some tickets. I'm just curious if where that
Sorry, I
lands.
couldn't quite hear it. I couldn't hear the first part.
The ticket surcharge, I'm just curious where that lands in comparison to other communities.
I'm gonna have to ask Deb.
It's actually a pretty astute question. And it's actually part of the reason for working with the city and financial services to try to get the surcharge. It was initially instituted by Courtney Council in 1993. And I think it was $1 at the time, and it was instituted. Then it went up in 2000 when the Theatre Society took over to $2, which it still is now. The reason that capital development fee ticket surcharge was originally implemented was because the theater received no funding at that time from other municipalities other than Courtney. So the Courtney Council instituted that surcharge as a way to help support the theater's capital needs without us doing something, you know, that's really not successful, which is differential pricing by postal code. You know, you live in Comox, you pay $5 more. So that was meant to be a fair way of doing it. But now number one, we do receive pricing. We do receive support from other municipalities, and we're working on getting that up. And what essentially happens is we were sending surcharge money over to the city and then billing the city for our capital purchases, and the money was coming back. So it just became an exercise in accounting. The surcharge is in fact low. We're looking to increase it by September 2025. Probably it will be $3 or $3.50, which is municipalities. It tends to range now between $2 and $5, at least outside of like Victoria and the GVRD in Vancouver. So good question.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think, you know, when you're going to buy a ticket, I don't think it really phases people to pay an extra buck, because other locations you do pay that. And we do have the Superstar program for those who are lower income. So anyway, not to just keep gouging people, but I think it might be a way to get a bit more money in the coffers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Moore. I don't see any further. Councillor Hillian.
Fully in support of moving this forward, and I'd like to move the recommendation.
All right. Are there any questions or comments before I call a vote? See none. All those in favor? And motion carries. All right. And we'll move on to 5.4.2, the Sid Williams Theatre Society Light Grid Upgrade Funding. And I'll pass it back over to Ms. Chen. Oh, or maybe Ms. Saunders.
Through the mayor to council, there was two separate recommendations there. So if you can consider the second recommendation, please.
Okay. Excellent. Somebody could second that? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think we did the first one, so that's good. Now we just need to do the second one. So it's just the one that's on the screen. I think maybe it's not in our printed stuff. That might be why it's causing some discombobulation. Okay, so I am discombobulated, but I think I'm on track now. So is all council comfortable with what's on the screen right there, or any questions or comments? Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I guess just a question for staff. Does this change the relationship between the capital asset improvements going back to the city? Just in reference to the next staff report in terms of the lighting. And so if the reserve is in fact going to the SID, they make capital improvements, to the value of those capital improvements come back to the city.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. So the value of those improvements funded by the reserve, they will be captured back to the city as assets because they'll be considered contributed assets back to the city. And so they are, and we'll work with the society in terms of when the projects come up and to ensure that the value and the accounting is and the information is summarized and returned to the city so that we make sure that that we capture that value.
All right, and that's been moved and seconded, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And motion carries on the recommendation 2. And now we can move on to 5.4.2, the City of Williams Theatre Society Lighting Grade Upgrade Funding Request. And back to you, Ms. Chan.
Thank you, the mayor and council. So with this request, I've asked Deb Renz from the general manager of the City of Williams Theatre Society to provide a background on this request. And
I appreciate that the mayor was, I'm sorry, that the honorable mayor was worried about the number of slides we had, but I mean, it's showbiz, right? We're gonna have some show. Right. I'm used to my big pink microphone. This one's so different. Anyway, thanks, Mayor Wells and council and Joy and Susie, and as well as Richard for putting your time into this today. I'd also like to introduce Eric McDonald. He's one of our board members who's our incoming treasurer, and he's going to make sure that we don't misspend any of that surcharge money that you're sending back to us. Okay, so you know what? I'm going to do a bit of a relay race through our shared history here because the city has some new board members. The city has some newer staff and newer councillors who didn't go through all of this. And I think that it's really important to look at how we got here, and that will really inform our relationship and all the trust that we share going forward. City Williams Theatre has come a really long way since the first live performances hit the stage. Now, this is obviously 1935 when it was still a movie theater. Now, Riverside Hotel burned down 1968. And that is really, that started everything with the theater as a performance space, because that's when the project for turning it into a performance space in 1971 began. That's kind of what the plaza looked like. That's interior renovation. I'm going through these really fast. If you want to go through them slowly, visit the Courtney and District Museum. They have this whole collection there. 1977. Look at that. It's I think that's my husband's truck. What the hell? Okay, I'm going to stop with the slideshow for a second, although it's kind of fun. Anyway, so City Williams Theatre, once defunct movie theater, was completely closed down, gutted, used for auctions, and it was acquired by the city of Courtney. And with the help of a legion of volunteers, which was led by Sid Williams, who was a well-known stage and television actor. It was opened as a community performance space in 1971. As the theater got busier and the community as a whole grew, a professional staff was put in place in 1992, including me. I'm older than I look. Somebody better agree with me. And in 1999, an engineering assessment of the theater shut the facility down, mandating an earthquake safety upgrade. The city of Courtney at that time decided to make a major investment in the facility, put $2.5 million into the building, which not only rendered the facility earthquake safe, but also expanded the lobby, added a balcony, improved the public and performer spaces of the facility, including Councillor Morin and I were just discussing the dressing rooms, and that was part of the improvement in between 1999 and 2000. At this same time, the recommendation of the city's theater advisory committee, the City Williams Theatre Society, was formed. First board was appointed by Courtney Council in May 2000, and the SWTS was intended as a theater-focused organization to take over theater operations from the Courtney Rec Association, which had overseen the theater since 1971. Since 2000, our community and usage of the theater continued to grow, which is how we got towards the 45,000 people using the theater through the front door. And indeed, as was already mentioned by our president, the CID prior to the pandemic was the third busiest professional venue on Vancouver Island. We're coming up on a big anniversary for the Theatre Society, and I just this picture here was the 75th anniversary of the building itself. That's kind of what we look like now after the big renos. It's kind of last couple of years ago. Okay, so COVID virtually shut the theater down, as you all know, with live streaming was keeping our programming going, but it was really on life support. We reopened in 2021, but to a lot more economic uncertainty than the other major opening milestones of 1971 and 2000. Current economic realities, our president has talked about those a little bit, mean that both inflation and shrinkflation have taken a deep bite to its purchasing power. Technology especially, and some of our specialized supplies are far more expensive to purchase and harder to come by. Well, I need a speech assistant. At the theater, we have a page turner when the piano player's there. Anyway, our local labor market that we're dealing with now is another challenge because it's competitive in live performance facilities. It's highly unionized. There's only 2 non-union venues on Vancouver Island. We are one of them. The Port Theatre is the other one. And qualified personnel are harder to find in all areas. And ticket buyers, whether it's for a headline performer like Jan Arden, which I know some of you were at, or just a community dance recital for someone coming to see their children perform, our ticket buyers are having trouble stretching their dollars. Okay, and at this time, the St. Williams Theatre Society has operated the theatre for the same amount of time as the Courtenay Recreation Association did. We've completed many theatre improvement projects funded by all levels of government. We've also received support from our own donors and sponsors. But the one major relationship that has remained consistent through this entire time has been our partnership with the City of Courtenay. This relationship has ensured that our community and our region have a safe and attractive and accessible performance space, and that we are once again the 3rd busiest professional venue on Vancouver Island. Nanaimo's Port Theatre is number 1. The Royal Theatre in Victoria is number 2, and we are number 3, which I think is not bad for a converted 1935 movie house, because we're competing against some really purpose-built facilities. So last time I visited council, you were approving a strategic cultural plan, which speaks volumes about the city's desire to have a vibrant and growing arts scene here, especially when we hear about the decline of the arts scene in a lot of other cities. And I'm sure you've seen the news about Victoria, about how many of their music venues are closing down and how the arts scene is struggling there. So I think for the Comox Valley, we're taking a different direction. Today, you've heard from your staff about some additional support the SWTS needs, both for operations, as Richard pointed out, and for facility infrastructure. I think the pandemic and changes just in the community and at the city has kind of disrupted our capital planning, which we're now trying to get back into. We have made presentations, obviously, to other local governments as well. We are earning 60% or more of our own revenue. And in all honesty, I think our board would be is working hard to grow our earnable revenue. And of course, what we do and what we've done since the formation of the society is to leverage local investment for capital improvements with funding from the province, the federal government, foundations, et cetera. So the Light Grid project, that's a lot of preamble, but I just wanted to kind of let you guys know how far we've come. So the Light Grid infrastructure project that we're asking for your support for in the form of a $100,000 city grant in your upcoming budget year, the St. Williams Theatre Society has matched this with over $200,000 from our own accumulated reserves and $250,000 from the government of BC. So not only does this leveraging make it a good investment for the city, but it also makes a substantial safety and efficiency improvement to the theatre. The structural engineering of the theatre roof, or the ceiling above the stage, which you see there, which really gives us a clear idea of what the load capability of that is. And it also means that our technicians, you can see one of them walking there right now, but our technicians don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing high ladder work anymore with the installation of the grid. So it really will benefit our community and the facility for the next 25 years at least, if we stick to the maintenance plan for the equipment, which of course we will. And just to give you a sense of the impact, so I know I saw several of you at the recent production of Cabaret, which you know, given what's going on in the world today, was both an entertaining and an educational production. But that's a very large cast production and also brought 2,500 people through the downtown core, which improves business for restaurants and just everything in our cultural district. The theater's utilization of space is, if you remember Richard's presentation, 230 bookings a year. And then when you build in maintenance time and, you know, less desirable dates like statutory holidays and Mondays, we really have a tight squeeze for other groups to get into the theater. So one of the benefits of the lighting grid is the reduced turnover time between events, which is going to help other community groups use the theater as well. Which is why I just mentioned Cabaret, because that's a big community production. Some of you might also remember Honorable Murray Sinclair recently passed away, leader of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Well, the senator appeared at the St. Williams Theater through the magic of technology in 2020. In fact, that was our last audience event before the pandemic. And so we had already put a system together to bring him into the theater virtually in a way that the audience that was attending in person could interact with him. That is another thing that SID is all about, is taking our space on the national stage and making something happen that benefits both the country and our community. I think we have a theater that we can be proud of, and City of Courtenay has been sort of our steadfast partner in that for many, many years. And I could point out, because I recently did this myself, you could go to Vancouver, Victoria, or Toronto and pay double the money or more for a production of lower quality or the same quality. I wouldn't go automatically lower. But the fact is, we're really fortunate in the Comox Valley. We have so much talent. We have so much potential here. And I think, you know, we're really only, in some ways, it seems like at the beginning of what we can accomplish with our theater facility and our theater community. So I just want to thank the City of Courtenay for their excellent support for their community theater over many years. We're hopeful that you will help us with this major project as well. And I know that you've received invitations to join us on December 5th to actually showcase the system itself and how it works. And so share the limelight. We're also going to be launching this on December 5th. This is a legacy fundraising campaign, which is going to be both for artistic and operations, but also for bricks and mortar. I can tell you we've actually haven't even quite launched the program yet, and we've actually got our first $10,000 donation. So I'm super stoked and excited about that. Richard and Eric and I will be collecting checks from all of you after the presentation. No. But the fact is, the community believes in the theater, the city believes in the theater, the other municipalities, we're working on them. And I just think there's a lot we can accomplish together. And I just want to thank you for believing in arts and culture in your community. Okay, questions, hard ones this time.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the presentation, and you blasted through those slides pretty quick. I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Chan.
Thank you, Deb. Through the mayor and council. So the staff report is, seeks council's approval to grant $100,000 from gaming funds to the St. Williams Theatre Society for its completed lighting grid project. And I think trying to remind council back in July of 2024, we had provided a briefing note about the project. And at the time, the society had intended to fund the project 100% up through its own funding resources. However, as Deb has explained, due to inflation, rising project costs, so there was unexpected costs related to roof remediation and hazardous materials abatement. It initially the board, society board were prompted to borrow funds towards the project. So this was considered, but after discussions with staff, the grant option was brought forth. And by providing a grant option, we avoid the administrative burden, or additional measures required with a loan if we were to provide one. It's also considered that now with the project complete, the city owns this upgraded lighting asset, and it's enhancing our theater. And in terms of financial implications, the grant will be issued by the end of 2024. And so in terms of the value of the project, it's over $500,000 of assets to the city's financials. And so with the recommendation for you, I open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And I just concur, having worked in Victoria for about 10 years at most of their facilities as well as performing there. When I came here, I was a little disappointed that we just had the Sid Williams Theatre, but the performances have been world class. So I just and the staff have been amazing, which I still work with to this day. So Councillor Healing.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to point out two things. One is the exceptional job that the Sid Williams Theatre does in engaging volunteers in the community. And the second is that I appreciate the staff recommendation, and I think that gaming funds are raised not through taxation, but from the allocation that we get from the casino revenues, which are generated across the entire region. So if we approve this, it's the entire region basically pitching in to support our theater. And if there's nobody else going to say anything, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. And so it would have been 30 minutes if we had done that before the dinner break, just from a mathematical. So you guys are very tight, so I do appreciate that and all you do. So thanks very much for your presentation tonight. All right, we'll move on to external reports and correspondence. We have a letter from the Comox Valley Regional District regarding the extension of the pump station discharge permit, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. On the agenda is some correspondence that follows up on a previous consideration by council. Very good project. We're working very closely with regional district staff, and it's important that we provide this extension. Given the timing of request and turnaround, we don't have a staff report in front of you, but the same conditions exist as council considered previously. Mr. Shaw is here if you have any questions and can advise it's going well so far. And if there were some issues, we would flag them for you as part of this consideration.
Thanks very much, Mr. Garvin. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries, and we'll move on to the letter from Tracy Clark from Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce. All right, and are there any questions or comments regarding the letter? Oh, Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Very quickly, Councilor recalls our partnership with the Chamber around business attraction retention. Anticipate an update to council in the new year on a lot of work that's underway, and we're really grateful for this partnership because it's filling a gap that we currently have.
All right, I still don't see any questions, so you did a great report. I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that passes unanimously, and move into internal correspondence. And we have the research project for the College Community Social Innovation Fund grant, and I'll pass it over to Ms. Saunders.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Through to Council. Just before I start, just want to acknowledge that Yu-Ching Chen, the Department Chair with Recreation Studies at Langara College, is online and can answer questions if there are any. So the briefing note is to share the exciting news that Langara College, in partnership with Courtenay Recreation, the City of Burnaby, the BC Parks and Recreation Association, and the South Asian Community Hub, was successful in its application to the College and Community Social Innovation Fund and has received a grant of $355,000 for the work that they proposed. So the work, as described in the report, will investigate the barriers that racialized and immigrant communities face in accessing public recreation, and also engage in co-creation initiatives between communities and municipal staff to improve access and social integration. Over the next 3 years, Langara College, in partnership with the City of Courtenay, the City of Burnaby, the BCRPA, and South Asian Community Hub, will engage with local interest holders in each local community to understand barriers, design training for staff, initiate co-creation processes where we work together in partnership with community to address barriers and also to share findings. And one of the reasons that Courtenay was selected was to be able to provide that experience from both a smaller community, rural community, as compared to a more metropolitan city or urban center like Burnaby. So through the previous approval that council provided in support of this grant application, we did approve in-kind support for this important work, which includes facility access and in-kind staff time to support training and engage with community. Staff are looking forward to supporting this work and being a part of it to ensure recreation is accessible and inclusive to all community members. And I'm here, and Yu-Ching is here to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. It was very exciting. And I will pass it over to Councillor Hillian.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the fact that you've stayed up to join us. And I wonder if there's anything that you want to say about your prospects of working with the city and what this project may bring to our community.
Thanks for the opportunity to join the city council meeting here. I'm really excited, and Gary's really excited to work with the city of Courtenay. I find that a lot of the research that's happened in and around racialized and immigrant populations tend to focus on municipal, like large municipalities and urban centers. And I think there's a lot of value in partnering with smaller and rural communities, because the challenges that exist with smaller communities, they're quite different from major metropolitan areas. And I think there's lots of areas within not just BC, but across Canada that I think will probably see similar challenges that that the city of Courtenay may face. And so I think the project being able to focus on a smaller community is going to be really beneficial for Canadian society at large.
Thanks. That's great to know. I don't know how much you've looked at the history of this area, but it's traditionally been fairly homogeneous, apart from the Indigenous population, but there's an increasingly diverse population from Africa, Asia, and South America. And I think that this is a good opportunity for us to learn what those folks' experience is, and I look forward to the results. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I don't see any further. So the recommendation to receive. And so thanks for that. And all those in favor? And motion, Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't usually do this, but I just really want to identify and really raise my hands up to this partnership. When Ms. Saunders brought this to my attention, I was really excited. I know that the team in our CCS is very excited, and the partnership is really great. The power that emanates from our community facing services and recreation centers is really incredible. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and really looking forward to this. And I think it's just really, really important work that we can be doing, and we're really glad to be able to contribute, I would say, into the academic component of how important this is, because COVID and the lack of activities and the importance of open space really, really reinforces an area that we all love to see. And I just wanted to add that and with my thanks as the city administrator.
Awesome. Thanks so much for adding that extra context, and I really appreciate it. And with that, I think I already called a question, so we're already on to the next thing. But thank you very much for that. And we'll move over to 8.1, the delegation follow-up for the crosswalk on Mansfield Drive. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, Mayor, well, I noticed there's no recommendation, so I wonder if staff want to lead us a short conversation about how this looks from their point of view.
All right, Mr. Garbutt.
So thank you. Through to council, you may want to consider the city is working with MOTI on the crosswalk across Cliff Avenue to Mansfield Drive, providing important pedestrian and cycling linkages as per the cycling network plan. Additionally, staff are currently exploring opportunities for development funded offsite improvements in the area, and we have a local area plan that's coming. The delegation identified a specific need. We have policy that can guide this, and there is a way for this to move forward. At this time, we would obviously take council's direction, but we feel that we're in a position to be addressing this in a reasonable amount of time. And we note the input from that local business, but we will take council's direction.
Sorry, I just want to clarify the crosswalk across Cliff is much different than what they were requesting, though, right? But are you saying through that work that there might be an opportunity to find something to help? I mean, these guys are on basically a big parking lot with potentially cars coming through, I guess, relatively quickly, with little kids moving very slowly. That's the worry. But it's also like a really weird place to just plop in a crosswalk.
So thank you for the question through the mayor.
It's more of a
so what we're suggesting is work will be underway to address this issue in the not too distant future.
Okay.
But you have an immediate request. We do have the author and sponsor of our traffic calming and our speed management with us. So I don't know if Mr. Shaw wants to make any additional comments.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Garbutt, through the mayor to Councillor Frisch. That's a great question. It's a great point of interest with respect to this request. As we acknowledge, this corridor is not necessarily built to an urban standard. However, there is a local area plan that is underway. There are some current developments in the process or in flow that would facilitate the extension of the existing crosswalks across the frontage of those properties. So there are, as Mr. Garbutt articulated, many opportunities for improvements to be completed within the corridor as a result of those developments and the ongoing works for improvements within the municipal infrastructure within the corridor. And we do really see that those opportunities exist in the near future. That's not to say that we have a crystal ball. It's going to tell us exactly when that happens, but we do understand that those opportunities exist. And the crosswalk that we're specifically speaking to is provide access to the playground. There is an existing crosswalk on Mansfield Drive near to the north in that area. Not necessarily the best location for a crosswalk. And as that I offer that as only because as that sidewalk continues to be established on that corridor, we'd see that transition and move to where the end of that sidewalk is. So that would inevitably make it closer to its optimal location, which would be at the playground zone.
Yeah, and so I get that it's duly noted that this is a request, and you guys obviously will keep that in mind moving down the road. You know, when I drive across Hornby Island, or not Hornby, Denman to get to Hornby, you know, there's signs out everywhere saying, please slow down, children at play. I wonder if there might just be a bit of a down home solution for these people to put out a sandwich board with a big yellow, you know, just to make themselves feel a bit better. And obviously that probably doesn't meet any guidelines, but yeah, sometimes simple solutions are the best way to go in the short term.
And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't want this to appear critical, but it may not have been the best place to locate a childcare center given the challenges with the traffic. But regardless of that, I have lots of sympathy for these folk having worked on that street and knowing what some of the challenges are. But I wonder if it would be appropriate for staff to write to the presenters and let them know about the upcoming plans for the area and the ability to work with them to identify possible solutions.
Yeah, and that was something that we had talked about during the agenda review, I think. So, but Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, thank you for that. Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian, it's a great point. It's a great opportunity to connect with the business. I have connected personally with the individual that presented to council at the last meeting, so we've had a robust conversation. But another opportunity to engage is always important with our community to ensure that they understand what's in front of us in terms of challenges, but also what opportunities exist for us to work together to find reasonable solutions that meet the needs of both the city and the community.
All right, you don't need a motion for that? Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. So in terms of the traffic calming process, and is it more appropriate to wait for the local area plan, or would there be any benefit to suggest looking at that process and yeah, encouraging the sorry, the name of the person of the forest school proprietor to go that route, or?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's definitely an opportunity. Obviously, we want to encourage the use of our existing policies, whether with respect to traffic calming. The request was specifically for safe passage and crossing of the road. So I'm not sure that vehicle traffic or vehicle speed within that playground zone are currently an issue that would require the city through analysis to directly input infrastructure to mitigate those, specifically about passage and pedestrian access within the corridor.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting comment, Councillor Hillian, because there's a playground right there. So you would think that that's actually kind of a good place to locate a daycare and a walking path. But anyway, yeah, so probably the local area plan is more the route to go. Okay, thanks.
All right. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll withdraw that comment. It was probably not appropriate under the circumstances. And I will move that the city write to the presenters and inform them of the opportunities to work together on future traffic calming in that area.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right, we'll move into council reports. I'll start with Councillor Cole Hamilton, Councillor Frisch, Councillor Hillian, Councillor Jolicoeur, Councillor McCollum, Councillor Moran. And that leaves me. I'll just mention a few quick things here. School District 71 did have a Youth Climate Action Summit that I'm sure I saw Councillor Cole Hamilton there, maybe other councillors, but a great thing. A huge kudos to Serena from the school district who put it on, an amazing event. I also attended the BC Nonprofit Housing Association as well. I saw Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor McCollum there. An excellent conference to learn lots of things. And I was also able to tour a complex care facility in Vancouver with our city manager, gain lots of lessons learned at that tour. And then I met with the Director General from Taiwan as well while I was over there. And other than that, we have our in-camera resolution. All right, all those in favor? Motion carries. And we are adjourned.